Copyright disclaimer. Under Section 107 Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
All right, and welcome everyone. Welcome to my channel. I'm Kevin Hammer. This is my channel, The Issues from Left to Right, if you're watching it on my YouTube channel. I know it's been a while since I've done a stream where I haven't had my co-host Chris, which we have our own channel now for our KC Reacts. But I am especially excited for this stream today because I have some amazing guests. One gentleman I've had on before, Billy, of course. So welcome back, Billy.
Thank you.
And then we have two amazing gentlemen, actually from South Africa. We have SJ.
Thank you so much, buddy. Great to be here.
All right, and then we have David. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having us.
All right, so the reason I'm really excited about this stream is because admittedly most of my content that I've created actually focuses on America, you know, my home country. I tend to focus a lot on the left and its targeting of children and female spaces, you know, so whether it's about the transitioning of children, you know, chemical castration, of course, which is part of that, exposing children to drag and the alphabet insanity and the leftist insanity in general, like DEI and all that stuff. That tends to be what I focus on, and I specifically focus on America. However, thanks to Billy and thanks to these amazing gentlemen, I am actually I feel great that I have the opportunity to expand beyond America and discuss a really important issue, a really important topic happening in South Africa. And that is, well, right there, the title says it all: racism, persecution, and murder in South Africa, specifically towards white farmers or the Boer. So once again, welcome, gentlemen. So where we're going to start this is we're going to jump in, of course, from the American side here with Trump, because I will admit Trump recently really brought it to, you know, a lot of Americans' attentions, what's happening to farmers in South Africa. For a lot of us Americans, Billy is an exception, of course. The most we really know about South Africa are the vacation spots. We've heard of Nelson Mandela in school, and we've probably watched the movie The Color of Friendship. And of course, we've heard about apartheid and had that in a history class. But many of us aren't really familiar with really the intricacies of what's going on in South Africa, which these gentlemen are going to graciously help me with today as we discuss this topic. So with that, let's just get right to it. And first, we're going to reference Trump. All right, so not too long ago in February of this year, Trump posted to True Social, South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. It is a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't want to so much as mention. A massive human rights violation, at a minimum, is happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Also, I will be cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of this situation has been completed. Now, a lot of people took this as a sudden shift by Trump, like, where did this come from? But as Billy pointed out to me, that this actually is by no means the first time that Trump has focused on what's happening in South Africa.
That's right.
And yep. Yeah. And I want to thank you for that, Billy, because I feel like a lot of your fellow Americans, our fellow Americans, had no idea or really didn't pay attention that Trump had actually given this attention before.
Well, he posted on Twitter, what is now X, back in 2018 that he was going to have Mike Pompeo look into the situation with farm attacks and farm murders in South Africa. Yeah, that's it right there. And yeah, in August of 2018. And for a lot of the South Africans, for them, just this post alone was a big breath of fresh air that that there was some acknowledgement to the situation when really the rest of the world has been turning a blind eye on it.
Yeah, and if anyone's just listening specifically, that tweet, or well, X now, X post now, was by Donald Trump. I have asked Secretary of State Pompeo to closely study the South Africa land and farm seizures and expropriations, excuse me, a little with the accent there, and the large-scale killing of farmers. South African government is now seizing land from white farmers. So, although this actually also wasn't even the first time that Trump had referenced South Africa, I have two other tweets here from earlier than 2018. And here we have one from 2015. Trump said, "As I have long been saying, South Africa is a total and very dangerous mess. Just watch the evening news when not talking weather." Then in 2013, Trump also tweeted, "I really like Nelson Mandela, but South Africa is a crime-ridden mess that is just waiting to explode. Not a good situation for people." So this just shows that Trump has been focused on South Africa for a while. Now, before we get to like specific individuals like Nelson Mandela, because we will be getting to that, because I know Trump referenced him here in that tweet, I do want to say, please, if you're watching right now, feel free to comment. We do love engaging here with the comment section as we move forward. But before we do that, SJ, I'll go to you first. How does Trump's focus on South Africa? What's your response to that personally?
Given I think the most important thing for me personally for the last, I would say, 50 years of my life, from before school, I was fighting for the freedom of my people. And the essence for me, when Trump stood up, recognizing and calling our people by our name, like the Afrikaners, I experienced something divine. I couldn't explain to you, because for the last 50 years, from our own people, from abroad, even from the Americans, the whole pressure on our people was that we are not supposed to be in Africa. You know, they gave free range to the ANC to wipe us out if they want. The woke campaign against our nation itself, our history, our religion, our cultures, everything was just next level. And all of a sudden we thought we will just disappear in thin air. Nobody will ever notice what was going on the southern tip of Africa. With this amazing history that we have, we were just brushed aside under the apartheid black rule concept. And when Trump stood up, I don't think he will ever realize what impact it was politically. I was listening to Dr. Corneille Miller of the Freedom Front, leader in Parliament this week, and he said that we were all, friend and foe, was shocked to hear our name on the international level. So I think if we ever have our freedom again, we will definitely build a statue for Trump, because that was the tip in the right direction. So I will always salute President Trump, even if it's the only thing that he did for us. Was to call our name and recognize our nation, and give us credit for being in Africa.
And SJ, before we move to David, SJ, were you aware of Trump's mentioning of South Africa going back to 2013 and 2015? Or were you just familiar with 2018 or this year, 2025?
No, we got the whole shocking news that you met actually, I think in one other G20 or something meeting, he bumped into Ramaphosa, that was our president at that stage as well, and asked him about the farm murders. And Ramaphosa just responded by saying there is no such thing as farm murders in South Africa. So that's what we got back. But just the fact that Trump, was asking about us was something great for us to hope for. But we could never imagine that he will actually, before the 100 days was gone, and call our people by our name. It was just really uniting us. I think you could hear all the organizations and political parties was rushing to America to get the most out of it. Because we know America, you are the world on your own. So it's difficult to keep in the news. So that was just awesome. From Urania to Solidarity to everybody that call themselves Afrikaner was sending their organizations to Washington to make the most out of it. And I think in the future we will still look back and realize that it was nobody else, like no South African, but President of the United States that turned the history in South Africa.
David, what's your take on it? How do you feel when Trump brought attention to South Africa and what's happening to the farmers?
Finally, something is being done. The world is noticed what's going on here. The world is being told what's going on here. Since before 1994, it's been taking about 30 years for it to escalate to where it is now. And if you go and read the manifesto or whatever you want to call it of the ANC, let's call it the battle against white people or the Afrikaner or Boer, whichever terminology you prefer. It's like boiling a frog in a pot. You don't want to turn up the heat too much, because then it will jump out. So they have strategically and very slowly put some things in place over the past 30 years. But they have done it in such a pace that it's become a norm. Everything has been done to become a norm. So people, okay, this is not so bad. And then after 6 months, people are used to it, whatever it's been done. The biggest thing that, there's in South Africa, there's 11 official languages, but there's only one language that is being attacked, and that's the Afrikaans language. It's been taken out of our schools, basically. It's been taken out of the colleges, universities. There's no more Bible studies in Afrikaans permitted in our schools. And the really sad thing is, and we'll get to the apartheid thing later on, but kids of today are being taught stuff that they had no idea about. They didn't live in the era. But I had the thing even this morning. I drove to a local doctor's office, and the security guard at the gate, they had this little booklet that you had to fill in your vehicle's particulars and your name and stuff like that. And there was a black lady in front of me, and the security lady spoke to her and she let her drive in. And I stopped at the security checkpoint and she handed me the book. I said, "What is this for?" "No, you have to sign in before you can enter this premises." I said, "Okay," but that lady didn't sign. And she was a youngster. She was like maybe early 20s. And in an instant, from friendly, it turned into, "You settlers must go back to Urania." Wow. They are being taught something that's irrelevant to whatever situations we have on a daily basis. And stuff like this is getting out there now.
Yeah, and I mean, we can, I know Billy and I can at least relate to the fact that in our education system here in America, there has been a push to basically make white students, white kids feel as if they are responsible for a history of slavery and segregation. Kids that are 5 years old, right? There's this push to instill a sense of guilt into them, and to do that to any child for any reason, to try to instill a sense of guilt into a child for something that happened long before they even existed, before their parents or even their grandparents existed, is just absolute insanity.
Kevin, one thing that should be noted too is I can't remember where it was. I believe it was somewhere in New England area that One teacher was actually, I think she's suspended without pay or whatever it is, trying to encourage white kids to commit suicide because that's the right thing to do for the sins of your ancestors.
Yeah,
And
but you see,
thing,
that is one of the problems that's happening over here. Kids are being taught stuff that is irrelevant to their upbringing. I mean, pre-1994, we had more than 50,000 commercial farmers. Today, in 2025, we have less than 4,000 commercial farmers, and still they say we are the privileged. 90% of us don't even they are day-to-day workers. They basically live from hand to mouth. So that the stigma that's being taught is that the whites own 85 or 80% of the land. I can show you more than a million white people just in my province that don't own any land. They are day-to-day hard earning people that fight for survival.
Well, speaking of the people and the fight going on in South Africa, I think now is a great time to an opportune time to jump to the who are the players, right? From the political parties to even activists to terminology. What players do we have when it comes to discussing South Africa? Who should we be focused on? And with that, I'm just going to pull that up quick. All right. So, SJ, I'm going to throw it to you first with this one. Who are the primary players? Who, if anyone who's just learning about what's going on in South Africa, what are the parties and what are the names that they should know first and foremost?
Kevin, yes, I think what's important to have context to South Africa. I had the privilege to visit your country as one of the guest speakers of the Young Republicans for 3 months in the early 90s as national youth leader of the Conservative Party. So I know we that don't live in America think you don't know what's going on in the world. And I always tell the people, because America is the world. You are such a big world on your own. So I think it's difficult for most Americans to know exactly what South Africa is all about. Most of the people will say, you know what, for South Africa, why are you not black? Something like that. So just to give you some context, we are about 61 million people in South Africa, with about 21 million under 18, to give you some idea, 42 million that is actually registered with a staff code that can vote, to give you an idea. And we have about between 10 and 30 million people that's not citizens that come from all over of Africa into South Africa. So I think it's important to get that reality. When we start off with 94, the ANC obviously was the dominant party. Mandela was the leader, but they I think they split into 3 parties today. On the high days, they got 21 million votes. No, I lie. 12 million votes. They stuck with 6 million now. But the previous president, Zuma, actually started his own party called Umkhonto weSizwe Party. And they walk away with the other 3 million, and obviously EFF of Julius Malema with close to 2 million. So at the end of the day, the ANC is still the ANC, just in 3 different parties. So they are really shattering and falling apart. And that's the crisis that we have now. The other, I would say, black dominant party is the IFP that we'll see in the left upper corner. It's a traditional Zulu party of Buthelezi. Now, for interesting sake, when we were still the Conservative Party in South Africa and the old Afrikaner Republic, we were in alliance with the IFP. So the Zulu people, I would love to share some information about the Zulus and the Boers and the Afrikaners We have a beautiful history. The Zulu people and Afrikaner people. The Zulus is still the biggest tribe in South Africa. Some of your people know about Shaka Zulu and all those things. They are very much supporting the MK today, which is Zuma's party. But the rest of the parties, I would say, which is important, is the DA on the right. Is the second biggest party in South Africa. They managed to, and the sad thing about this, they are the extremely English left party, funded by most of the Jews in South Africa. Very, very liberal, hate the Afrikaners, hate conservatism from the picture in 1806 in South Africa. But what happened there was when the National Party, that over close to 4 million voters, and the DP those days had about 300,000 votes, but they had a very strong leader and the National Party a very weak leader. So when F.W. de Klerk resigned out of government, they stuck with this terrible leader, and he just faded away. So Afrikaners grabbed for survival, and they formed the new party, the Democratic Alliance. So the Afrikaners mainly is voting for the Democratic Alliance with the 300,000 English-speaking people, not a lot of black people. So the United Front, as far as whites are concerned at this stage, is the Democratic Alliance. Then it's these small parties, like the Good Party on the left-hand side, the orange one. Is a colored lady from the Cape Flats, actually very, very strong leader, that's representing the colored people, which the party, the EFF on the bottom of the ANC logo, is the most, I would say, dangerous party, especially now they kind of getting close to the MK party of Zuma. So as far as I'm concerned, the future in South Africa will be played out by the MK party and the EFF. They are not see themselves as part of the Constitution of South Africa. They are very revolution orientated. They are very anti-white. That's obviously the clips that you see of Malema shouting "Kill the blue, kill the farmer." So they are really.
We'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, they are extremely dangerous. I would just say the Freedom Front Plus is the more Afrikaner party that's left. They took part in the election when most Afrikaners, the right-wing Afrikaners, just get a step back, when the referendum of 92 that F.W. de Klerk calls, close to 900,000 Afrikaners said no. So most of them is not taking part in this system at all. They never voted in the last 30 years. But some of the National Party and a little bit of the Conservative Party people form the Freedom Front Plus, who is actually representing the freedom for Afrikaners in the new constitution. But that is what I would say the main players as far as political parties is concerned.
Wow. Sorry. Go on, Billy.
I just wanted to say too, as I've said many times before, part of the reason why we're having this discussion and it's important for Americans to listen is because what happens in South Africa often mirrors what happens in the U.S. And Jacob Zuma, former president, is a good example of that. Jacob Zuma is a complete, total imbecile. He's stupid. I mean, there's a video out there of him trying to count, and he sounds like the buffoon that he is. But he's also in his golden years, just like Biden. So basically, what Biden, Biden and Jacob Zuma are just black and white versions of each other, basically. Too old to be in office to begin with, and can't even. One can't speak properly. The other can't even count. And then, of course, this another example of how stupid Jacob Zuma is that he supposedly slept with a woman that had HIV, and he said, all I got to do is take a shower.
Oh goodness! Don't get me wrong. We have some real winners here, obviously in America, and Billy, I know you can attest to that.
Yeah.
although Billy, because Billy is definitely the one that got me focused on this. As I said earlier, most of us Americans, like I said, we know about Nelson Mandela and, apartheid, and that's pretty much it for South Africa. Now, SJ, and I'll get to you in a moment, David. SJ, when you went into depth with the parties there, and Billy, let me know if you agree with me here. What's interesting about that is, while yes, here in America we do have multiple parties technically, really the only parties we really have are the two big parties, Republican and Democrat, which honestly even goes against our founders, what they actually believed we should have. But there are some smaller parties, of course. I'd have to say probably the larger ones that would come under after the Democrat and Republican Party would be, you have a lot of people coming up as libertarians. Obviously, you have some Green Party members, and you have like the Conservative Party. They're supposed to actually be the harder line conservatives. However, here in New York State, that's not the case. In New York State, it's actually interesting because in New York State, the conservatives in my area often endorse Democrats, not Republicans. So it's actually quite interesting there. And then, of course, we have the Working Families Party, the Green Party. We did. So New York State, because we do a lot more by states. I'm not sure how it is in South Africa. New York State, a number of years back, they passed it so that they made it so that your party, the candidate that you chose to represent your party in the general election, had to get a certain number of votes or else you lost ballot access. So what that resulted in is that all but 4 parties in New York State lost all ballot access. So there's definitely that push here in America to keep certain parties in power and in play more over others. So I'm not sure how much that's reflected. I know you went a little bit, but in South Africa and how that dynamic is. But David, I do want to go to you quick. What's your feel on this? The parties, the players, even terminology.
Well, let me put it like this. Pre-1994, the IFP was actually the dominant black party. It was humongous. And there was a big power struggle between the ANC and the IFP. And it can be explained through a documentary that was put together by AfriForum a couple of years ago. The documentary, people can search it up on the internet. It was called Tainted Heroes. And it paints a somewhat of a picture of how the new South Africa came to be and the power struggles that there was between all these significant powers in South Africa. But if, in my opinion, if you look at the current parties, there are only 4 dominant parties, in my opinion. You see, I'm not a politician. I have never voted, and I don't think I will ever vote for any party. It's just a money game to me. But the 4 prominent parties, in my opinion, is the VF Plus, Vryheidsfront Plus, the DA, EFF, ANC. Now, to break it down, in my opinion, if you want absolute chaos with no sense of direction, no abidance by the law or anything like that, then you look at the EFF. It's just flipping chaos. Wherever they are, it's just chaos. There's always fights, and they like to put it on the internet. If you look at service delivery that's not being done anywhere in South Africa, you look at the ANC. They are the masters in that, and corruption as well. I mean, billions of rands has gone missing. And this is not out of my own mouth. It's widely available on the internet. Everybody can search it up, and they can see the facts for themselves, how money is being looted and whatever. But it's not only in the EFF, not only in the ANC, but it's like a general thing in all our municipalities. There is somewhat of a corruption going on in all of the state-owned enterprises are basically bankrupt. Most of the I mean, like the railway it's almost non-existent. Our National Defense Force, it's scary. They put people in power that has never even been in the military. They make them the
General.
Yeah, the general of the SANDF, that has never served a day in their lives. If you want to look at that's one thing I can give to the DA. I'll take my hat off for that. When it comes down to service delivery, the DA is on top of it. If you go to Cape Town now, I have yet to see a cleaner place than the DA running the Cape Town, the Eastern Cape, that part. It is clean, everything works. It is just a beautiful place to visit. Then you get to the Freedom Front Plus. It's hard to say anything negative about them. They really try there. But all the other smaller little parties, they're irrelevant. They're still competing to get in there, but there's only so many seats available in Parliament, and the dominant 3 or 4 parties are having those seats.
I think. Yeah.
Sorry, buddy. I just want to come in here. I think what's important here is to know that politics in South Africa is over. It's over and done with. All the people that is eligible to vote in South Africa last year, 37.8% took part in this election.
Yeah.
So the Afrikaners is not voting. You just hear from David himself, yeah. So it's over. People is not. So they are so disillusioned with the reality of South Africa. After 30 years of ANC rule, the ANC couldn't get a majority. Now we're stuck with this national government of unity stuff, which is a total mess. So we are living in the end of the negotiation between F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela. The Rainbow Nation is gone. It's over. The risk now is, if we really want to talk politics, is who's going to take initiative now in and outside Parliament? Who's positioned actually to take momentum? And that is where and I know I hear Billy with Jacob Zuma. I met Jacob Zuma, and he's actually a very friendly guy. And as a Zulu, he knows exactly what he's doing. On our Western standards, I get that. But as a tribal leader in KZN, he showed everybody what he can do in a party in 6 months. He kind of became the 3rd biggest party. So he's the official position of South Africa at this stage. So don't throw Jacob Zuma away, because the Zulu people, which is the biggest tribe, is backing him. And Ramaphosa is a vendor. Nobody knows about him. And the Xhosas, who was Mandela's tribe and Mbeki's tribe, is just missing in action. So South Africa is on its way to absolutely chaos. And if we can sit in a political sphere and talk about politics, we are missing what's happening in South Africa.
I think, SJ, I think to a degree, I think Billy and I can both speak to this another way we can relate. And we're going to get into this more, actually, Americans relating to South Africa more specifically later, is that there really is, it feels like globally, there is a bit of a voter fatigue in a lot of places, a lot of countries around the world. I know a lot of people feel that way here in America too. With that, we are going to move on because we want to get to some clips, which we have coming up. But before I get us on with those clips, I do want to go to the comments quick. Now, it's just to confirm, the correct pronunciation is Julius Malema?
Yeah.
Malema.
Malema. All right. So Johan, or is it Johan? I'm not sure which one.
Yeah.
Huh?
in Afrikaans, if it's a J, it's a Y sounding.
So it's Johan. All right. I knew it was one or the other. I just wasn't sure. All right. So yeah, it's like Jose in Spain. All right. So Johan in the comments, he actually has a couple.
V sound too. So
he said Julius Malema and his clan should all be apprehended for crimes against humanity for singing the "Kill the Boer" chant so freely. He says, and the ANC government should again be declared a terrorist organization. He also says, furthermore, the U.S. government should invest in South Africa farmland to enable intervention whenever necessary in response to unlawful land grabs. Mind you, here in America, especially among conservatives, what's interesting is right now there's this battle, and you'll see it even in our Department of Defense, between isolationists and those who actually want to engage more on a global scale and interact with other countries and their internal conflicts or even external conflicts. Sean, he commented, DA is funded by the WEF, and Frida, she wants to say thanks, SJ. So she's so proud of you, Frida.
Thanks.
And Jan Van said the UK has just not issued a visa to Julius Malema, and EFF released a statement taking out UK badly. So I'm going to leave it with those before we move on. Any response to those? Anything?
Well, with Julius Malema, he recently said some stuff that were direct threats to President Trump and Elon Musk, and which caught the attention of the Secret Service. So, you know, I mean, that probably is why his visa is revoked and he has to stay in South Africa because, I mean, I know he's got some brainwashing schemes up in the UK. He often goes to England and he does the critical race theory speeches of his own there. And also, about one thing about Julius Malema is he is a big, I'm going to say not an admirer, but a big worshiper of Fidel Castro. When Castro died, he spent South African tax dollar money, and not his own, mind you, even though he had plenty of money of his own, but he spent South African tax dollars to fly to Cuba for Castro's funeral.
Wow. So Jan Van actually just did an update, breaking news. He says Julius is stranded at OR Tambo. UK refused the visa for him to go to the UK. So I don't know how breaking that is.
Just give some context to Julius Malema. I think there was a program on it's called Carte Blanche on South African, kind of government TV, where people in jails came out and admit that Julius Malema actually paid them to kill farmers, and so he's personally involved in farm murders. And I had a debate with Carl Neas a few months ago. On farm murders, and he's now a member of the EFF, Julius Malema's party. And I challenged him, and he said, "No, it's not true." And because I challenged him, a few weeks later, I signed a contract with an American company, a big American company in South Africa, and I was denied the contract because they said I was flagged by the Americans because I challenged Carl Neas. Now that was under Biden's rule, but it gives you some idea how quick the international politics responds to something like that. I just challenged a member of parliament of the EFF about farm murders, and I was flagged by the Americans. So they really know what's going on in our country, and it's amazing for me that people will in South Africa say AfriForum said something bad about the farmers, and now Trump tweeted and everything. They really don't know how involved America is in South Africa.
Well,
see, another thing that's, sorry to interrupt you, another thing that is blatantly clear in South Africa is let's call them the general population of South Africa is getting so frustrated with the ANC, the EFF, the DA, whoever they are, because of one simple thing. South Africa is a very, very big place. There is more than enough space for everybody. But for some reason, and the ANC has been in government now for 30 years. For 30 years, there's been, and this is not, you can speak to any South African. Ask them where was the houses built. Ask them how many improvements were made. There's no upliftment. Everything just is keeping, it collapses day after day. Everything just gets worse. And the main concern that the majority of not only white people, colored people as well, some guys that I spoke to, this is the concern. It is that for some reason, these two main parties, ANC, EFF, and BLF, whatever they are called, I can't remember the name. For some reason, they are influencing people in South Africa to hate each other. I mean, South Africa is a big place. There's enough sun for everybody. You don't have to be dominant over another race. Do your own thing. Give everybody their own piece of land and let them run themselves. Let them govern themselves. But they won't do that. I mean, for something as simple as a good neighbor, I don't see anything wrong with that. But apparently it is unacceptable for the EFF or the ANC or any other party to coexist with another race and just be good neighbors.
Well, I'd have to say, here, David, here in America, we can relate to that too, because we're definitely seeing more divisiveness around race and culture in general. With that, I do want to jump to the clips we have for Julius Malema, because one of the things, and this goes without saying, is that we know, especially Billy and I know as Americans, that if this had been a white politician in South Africa making these kind of statements, the left here in America probably would have created a version of the left for Palestine, but for the parties and for groups in South Africa. Similar enough how you have feminists for Palestine in America, and you have queers for Palestine in America, right? You have basically here in America, you have chickens for KFC. I'm sure that if a white politician in South Africa had said these words that we're about to play here, it would be a very different reaction on the left. The left would be going nuts here in America, and you would be hearing it echo for sure. So with that, we're going to jump into the more well-known clip of the chant of "Kill the Boer." Just pull that up.
Alliance, shoot to kill, Yamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer, brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa.
All right, so I do want to jump right into the next clip, and then we can discuss both collectively, because some people, there are those that actually listen to this in America here on the left, and they were like, oh, it's just a small chant. It's just, they played it down, right? Now, many of these individuals here in America, they're not as familiar with this next clip that we have.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I'm saying to you, we've not called for the killing of white people, at least for now. I can't guarantee the future.
Yeah, but I mean, you'd understand somebody watching that, especially as it gets shared on Twitter, they freak out. It sounds like a genocidal call.
Cry babies. Cry babies.
I'm not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now.
I can't give a guarantee of the future. especially when things are going the way they are.
Subtext.
Especially if things are going the way they are, there will be a revolution in this country, I can tell you now. There will be an unled revolution. An unled revolution is the highest form of anarchy.
So all I can say quick, and then I'm going to throw it to you, SJ, is that if this happened here in America, if a white politician, a white leader of a party said anything even close to that, they would be doxxed. Their house would probably be set on fire. It would be absolute chaos. We'd have another summer of love of burning cities to the ground. That is likely what would happen. But obviously, this is just absolutely, it's being seen as permissible. I don't know how the feel is completely in South Africa. Obviously, I've heard from you gentlemen. But here in America, especially on the left, they just kind of shrug. So, SJ, these two clips taken together, what's that gut response?
It's breaking my heart. I think the two realities is that he's sitting in the biggest stadium in Africa. It's a soccer stadium that the World Cup was when it was in South Africa, and it's not just a song. I started the Brendan Horner Foundation with my partner a few years ago, and we spent a lot of time and effort and money going from one farm murder to the another. Brendan Horner, I don't know if you remember him, he was a 20-year-old guy.
Very familiar story.
It was just all over the world. I myself was on different international stations about Brendan Horner. And it's not just Brendan. There's close to 2,000 farmers that was brutally murdered from the ANC took over. 528 women and children. And they're not coming into the house and kill them. They make sure that nobody's on the farm. They overlook the farm for 2-3 days, maybe 2 weeks. They come into the house when only the farmers is there. Mostly early in the mornings when most of the workers is not yet there. They lock them up and they most of them, some of the time they wait for the people to come from church and they're already in the house. They kill the dogs, and then when the farmers enter the house, they brutally till they kill them after a day or so, a lot of hours. You should see most of the pictures. It is horrendous. And even with Brendan, they hung him on a pole after they chop him into pieces and left him there for his dad to get. And when most of the Afrikaners pitched at the court case a few days later, Julius Malema was so arrogant. Our people were not angry. We were so hurt. We were so sore for what was going on. And all of a sudden, the Minister of Police flew in with his chopper and spoke to his mom and dad. And it's all this pictures on TV cameras of they're going to sort this out now. Julius Malema challenged the Afrikaners for the next court case and said he will meet them there. And that's where Xenophobia actually happened. And it is heartbreaking to know what's going on. And this October, it will be 5 years later. And we as a foundation paid people to find out who it was. We know where they are. We know who they are. We know exactly how it happened, how 5 guys organized by the police, driven by the police off the murder scene from the farms, held by the police when they were hurt. We know everything. And still up to today, there's no justice for Brendan. There was a quick court case and nobody could sort anything out. So there's big things they make for farm murders and just nothing happened. Over 90% of all the farm murders, it's just nothing happened after that. Last week, old farmer from over 70 was brutally murdered for hours and hours in his house. Yeah. And just nothing is happening. And that's why I say, people come and say, it's just a song. Go and stand, go into their houses, where blood is all over the floors, and you see people chopped up, little girls raped, their hands cut off. You have no idea what's going on in South Africa.
And we will be touching on those stories later for sure, because SJ, I don't mean to interrupt you there, because it's horrific. I can say this much: when I was doing the research and you gentlemen were helping me, and I was trying to find the right clips, the right information to present during this stream, I found myself paused for so many times and horrified in trying to find stuff that, first of all, someone wouldn't try to hit us with or get this taken down if presenting, because it truly is a horror show that is taking place.
Yeah, well, I've got the book by Ernst Roots called Kill the Boer, and the stories I have read out of that alone, it's getting harder for me to talk about, because, as I stated a little while ago, what happens in South Africa is mirroring into the U.S. So it makes me so concerned with, while Biden was in office and this huge influx of migrants coming across from Mexico, and what's going to happen to my family in rural areas that the police have to take, maybe 20 minutes just to get there to respond. This is frightening, and Americans need to pay it.
And Billy, we'll get on it later, because what gets tied to that real fear, that reality, is also here in America, the Second Amendment and the attack on the Second Amendment. And we know that the right to defend yourself is also an issue in South Africa as well, which we will also later touch on. But David, I want to go to you quick. These two clips combined, what's your gut response to hearing this? And first of all, especially to those who hear these words and don't seem to experience any kind of outrage in any sense, when you know that if it was a different setup, the rage would be echoing around the world. David, what's your take on this?
The biggest problem is, and this is a human thing all over the world, if it's not happening on your doorstep, it doesn't affect you. And that's the problem. For a guy like Julius Malema to stand in front of thousands of people and sing something like that, that tells you a lot about the person. That says to the majority of South Africans, I will not vote this guy into power. If he can do this to one race, who's to say my race is not next that he's going to target? If you look at Julius Malema, on screen and off screen, it's a different scenario. That tells the majority of people that he is being told what to do. He's following someone's instructions. He's in a playbook, and that's what's going on with him. Because off camera, he's a whole different guy. He's hanging out with white guys, having big lunches and dinners and parties, and he has white females sitting on his lap and stuff like that. But on camera, it's just kill the boer, kill the farmer. And it's been made off as a struggle song. I get it. Back then, yes, it was a chance to it was a chant being used to motivate people to back them in their struggle. I get that. I understand that. I in some way I could respect something like that. The old voortrekkers, they had the same kind of thing, but maybe in a different way. They had their own way to motivate the people to stay in the fight for freedom against the British. But here's the thing, though. I see on the internet now that he's being flagged, his visas are being cancelled. It's a good thing. It is a good thing. I totally agree with that. But, for a guy like this, or for any person, we saw it back then at Senegal too. They had a big stage there, and he was chanting his songs, and he had a couple of followers that they drove there on buses. The majority of them weren't even locals, because the locals of Senegal, if you go to the town of Senegal, all of those people get along. They work together. They use the same shopping carts. You won't see as different people. That town of Senegal is a very small town. All the people there are coexisting without nonsense like this being sung. At some stage, we have to sit down and ask ourselves, where is this heading? Because if you look at the report of Dr. Gordon, I forget his last name now, on the Genocide Watch, there's 10 stages, and we are at stage 7 out of 10.
Yeah, real quick.
On the Genocide Watch.
David, you're right, because this is the same person who predicted the Rwandan,
yeah.
the
Rwandan and the Tutsis, yeah.
Even happened. Yeah. So I think that needs to be taken very seriously as well. Well, one other thing to point out about Julius Malema too is it's obvious his feelings towards white people and Afrikaners, but he's also been caught before saying extremely hateful things about Indian people as well.
David, you gave us a great segue into the next topic when you were talking about your relation, your understanding of such chants, such songs at one point in history. Because as I said earlier, for us Americans, one of the things we do understand about South Africa was the history of apartheid. So with that, I just want us to touch a little bit on that time in history, because I feel like we just have to. This is just a basic screenshot from a paragraph of a description. Apartheid was a system of racial discrimination and segregation by the South African government. It was formalized in 1948, forming a framework for political and economic dominance by the white population and severely restricting the political rights of the Black majority. Now, before I go to USJ, what's interesting to me, whether it be in America or what we see in South Africa or other places around the world, is there seems to be this mindset here in America. It's all on the left. I would say no, I've seen a little bit of it on the right sometimes, but generally it's on the left, that the response to any kind of hate should be more hate. That the response to discrimination should be more discrimination. That the response to racism in history should be current racism in another direction. And I've noticed this is a consistent theme that we're obviously seeing, and we're most assuredly feeling it here in America as well, as I'm sure Billy can agree.
Well, can I start this one out really quick, please?
Sure,
Kevin?
Billy.
Yes. So we got to take a deeper look into apartheid and why it was formed to begin with. It was not about separating Black from white. It wasn't about that at all from the very beginning. The Zulus and the Xhosas were killing each other in rapid numbers all the time. A tribal war between the two of them. And white South Africans stepped in and said, okay, you two cannot behave. So you go to your corner and you go to your corner. That was the original idea for apartheid to begin with, was to separate the tribes from each other.
Yeah, I like the way that you think, Billy, and I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. But if you just give me a small context that I can give specifically to apartheid, you realize this is our fight for the last 30 years or more. How evil we are. We're actually part of the whole Nazi concept of killing Jews at this stage. So I think it's very important just to get some context. In 1624, the Dutch founded New York City, calling it New Amsterdam. It's your valley there, so you know that. So just a few years later, 1652, the Dutch came to the southern tip of Africa and founded Cape of Good Hope. So everything started for us a few years after you guys. And there was one thing that was built in who we are today. And I'm just going quickly through this. After the guys couldn't actually get this farm thing going in under the Dutch kind of state concept, they sent Boers, Dutch people, mainly from Flanders. Today you get the BBB, the Boere Burger Beweging, which is a very strong political party in the Netherlands. So that's where those people came from, and they called themselves free Vryburgers, free citizens. So they were not actually kind of the whole Dutch thing, just making food for the ships. They start taking slowly but surely moving into Africa. And what is very important, they had one identity, and that was to strive to be free. They don't want to dominate anybody. Just leave us alone on our farms. We just want to be free and look after ourselves. And that is a golden line that you can take right through apartheid, right through where we are now. So those farmers, and very interesting, for more than 800 kilometers, they moved into Africa. Over 100 years later, after they actually colonized the Cape of Good Hope, that was the first time they bumped into a black guy called a Xhosa at the First River. And there were struggles going on there. And Britain took the country 1806. So that's where the big struggle of the Afrikaner people started, with the British. And we are actually struggling today with that as well. So after the struggle there, we took our wagons and we went inland, and we called the Great Track today. A lot of people know the Battle of Blood River. That is actually started a great relationship between the Afrikaners and the Zulu people. We founded 2 republics just to be free. And I think everything would be great when we could govern ourselves in the Orange Free State and the Transvaal, 2 free republics. And then we got gold, the biggest gold in the world. So obviously Britain wants that gold. So we had 2 fights against the British. The last one was 3 years. We lost it. But at the end of the day, the British killed in concentration camps 32,000 women and children, 22,000 kids under 16 years old. And if it wasn't for that, we would be 6 million more Boers in South Africa, which really would impact the political process. So what happened then when the British took over? We were still 2 republics and 2 colonies, and they unite everything in a country that was never supposed to be one union. So they create this union of South Africa. At the end of the day, we were more than the British, so we took it over by a democracy, the process of election, and then we rule the Union of South Africa. And that is, we would go back to history, and our biggest mistake was that we actually took this whole country with all the black tribes in, with the British in, and we said we will rule this, eventually run into a republic. So remember Dr. Verwoerd, who's seen as the father of apartheid, took on the system that the British started. The British started Lesotho as a state on their own for the Sotho people. They did the same with Swaziland for the Swazi people. So Dr. Verwoerd, as a Dutch guy, actually, never was in Afrikaner school in his whole life. He saw Europe, and he said the best way to bring everybody together in a kind of a confederal state is to give everybody their own land. And that's what apartheid was going on. Bophuthatswana, Ciskei, Transkei. So he get this tribes in their own kingdoms. We were funding them. More than half of the rand was funded to run these countries. We built schools, hospitals, parliament buildings, name it. We built countries for them. And the only thing that we hold out was, like, we called it white South Africa. The rest of South Africa, we will govern with the people that is in that in our country. For example, working on the mines. So that's where the passports was created. When they said, if you are not a South African citizen, you live in Bophuthatswana or whatever, you have a passport. And that's where the whole struggle came from. And I think we can't understand apartheid if you don't understand the Cold War about the West and Russia. And I think Billy's the only one that will understand that. South Africa see themselves as the African state supporting the West. The communists was funding the ANC. They were training terrorists in Russia, in Moscow. Jacob Zuma was trained in Moscow. Nelson Mandela was trained in Moscow. And they sent him back to South Africa to use the struggle, as they see in it, to make South Africa a communist state, like Mozambique and all those countries up north. So that was the problem that we were stuck with. The biggest problem, I was the first guy to commit, or to know that what we went wrong is when you have civilizations around you, that's not on the same level. And I always say to the people, if you are Western and you have a Western culture, you're not a super race or a super culture. It's just different. If you go to Europe, and I think there's not even a 5% movement between the Germans and the Austrians and the French, whatever, in one European Union. They even don't want to mix because they like to be with their own people. And that is exactly what South Africa was all about. So what Verwoerd did, he took the European concept, put it in South Africa, and it would work wonderfully. It will still be the only solution in South Africa for peace for everybody, a confederal state where everybody can run themselves but work together. But the communists use that, make a huge racial thing out of it. The problem that we did was to put signs on saying that because you are a black person, you're not allowed to stand in this queue. This is only for white people. Or
that's what I was about to ask you about, SJ, is where things are. Like, for example, obviously, when we talk about here in America, right, we're talking about like policies, obviously, whites only, blacks only, no permitting of interracial marriages. So couples that wanted to, get married who happen to be of different races. So I think that, like, the history you explained is one thing, but I think from the American perspective in general, I know Billy's now the exception. In general, when Americans think of apartheid, that's what's in their head, right? The segregation you just discussed, the blacks only, the whites only, and those types of policies that being put in place.
Absolutely, I agree with you, and it's still tough for me to think that a Christian nation can actually do that. But if you understand the tribal structures, the inner fighting between the different tribes, and the way to try to stabilize that, there was when we found our small towns in the middle of Africa when there's nothing next to a river or something. We built a church, and slowly but surely people start building houses, and today it's a town. There were no black people, but slowly but surely when there's a mine or a business going, black people's coming in, working with them there, and they bring their families. So now you get this group of people, which is really a part of reality today. We had a struggle here in the Western Cape with the DI rule 3 weeks ago, where the whole community is up in arms because people from the Eastern Cape is flocking to the small towns in the Western Cape and just flood them. And what do people do when they don't have money, when they don't have food and anything? They go and steal, and they just take because they need to survive. That is what happened 100 years ago under apartheid rule. So the government said, they actually rang a bell, not in my lifetime, but before me, and say, listen, please, all the black people must be out of the town. It is not because of racial hatred, because those people was working in that town the whole day, looking after the white kids and everything. But it's a reason to keep people safe. And for me to say, was it just? Just look what's going on today in South Africa when there's freedom and there's no apartheid. All the killings, we cry about the farm killings. Do you know how many people every day is killed in South Africa? It is a terrible place to live in. So is this worse than apartheid? Then I will tell you the situation now in South Africa. Buthelezi, about 10 years ago, Gatsha Buthelezi, the leader of the IFP, got up in Parliament, and that was 10 years ago, and he said to the whole world, it was better for black people under apartheid rule than under this government. And the message for me on the left-wing people today is it's easy to criticize apartheid. Go and ask people that really know. It was much better for black people in the old apartheid system because we actually look after each other. I was raised on the farm under the apartheid, and if somebody was hurt or a woman got a baby or whatever, she would come to us as farmers, and we will do everything to help them. We rushed them to hospitals. We got the doctors. We really looked after our people. But the whole system now is such it's such a racial oriented mess that nobody's better off under this new system of freedom for all, a rainbow nation, and no racialism than it was under apartheid.
So David, so SJ, I want to get to David in a moment, but before then, because like I said, once again, coming at it from an American perspective, where we had segregation of our own and all that stuff, and in slavery and everything. For my perspective, when it comes to that, because some people make arguments. For example, interestingly enough, during certain points during segregation, the black family unit was stronger than it is today. It was more married couples and more family units and all that stuff in America. So there are people that make those types of arguments. Now, for me, though, I'm at least in the context of America, I would never argue for the for the segregation. Absolutely not. Even within my own family, we have people of different races who have married and started families. My real issue is, I think I always see in these types of situations that the wrong lesson is learned. It's kind of like, for example, the idea, kids playing, right? One kid slaps the other kid, right? So that kid's response is, well, then that means that kid, I have to slap them. And I feel like this is what the wrong path is, right? So here in the context of America, we had segregation, and the response to that from our leftists, from our BLM types, from our woke types is, well, we have to have a racist policy of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to me, what I'm seeing is, instead of learning from a history, such as segregation in the context of America's slavery as well, instead of learning from that history and finding a way to move forward as a united people, a united country, like again, I want to stress, speaking in the context of America, there is this, well, there needs to be guilt and there needs to be vengeance, and there needs to be all this that needs to take place. So I guess that's kind of like my response overall. Isn't necessarily, if I was discussing this with an American who was speaking of segregation in America and in a lighter tone, I'd be like, well, for me, the real issue is the response to it by the left and by those who pushed it. If that makes sense. If the point that I'm trying to make is coming across is, for me, it's not an idea of finding anything good in the segregation that took place in America. For me, it's the fact that the wrong lesson learned from it, well, now we need to be racist and prejudiced in a different fashion. That's just my take from an American perspective. I don't know if Billy wants to go on with that from an American perspective, but I do want to get to David first. Sorry, David. I don't know why Dan was in my mind. But David, when you hear apartheid discussed, I don't know if you've really seen Americans discuss it. What's your instinctual response to it?
My response would be that history has taught us that the victor writes the book, and that's what they did with apartheid. They took something that was supposed to give everybody, as I mentioned earlier on, its own place under the sun, and they turned it into this ugly stick to beat us with. The ANC, EFF, whoever these parties are, they will never get onto their stage and tell their followers that they had their own schools, they had their own hospitals, they had this and that. They will never tell them that because it's the wrong narrative for them to drive. They need to drive this apartheid was a bad thing. All white people and all white people are the privileged ones. They inherited everything. They own all the land, and I can carry on like that until tomorrow. So that's why I say the Victor now wrote the history book on the apartheid era, and that's the narrative being driven by the mainstream media, which they control anyway. And the only way that we can get the truth out there, not only us as white people, but the common South African, is to use social media. That's the only way to communicate, because the mainstream media will never speak about anything of this. They will never say that, like Asia gave the example of, this is why there was a black line and a white line and a colored line, or whatever you want to call it. There were specific reasons for everything, but they will never say that because it goes against the narrative that they are driving currently. And they will lose support because the majority of the youth, and they use the youth for all this violence and all this stuff, all the protests in streets. Go and look. It's not the older generation. It's not the generation of me and Asia, or even Billy. I think Kevin, you are a little bit younger than us, but they use the guys in their 20s, in their anything from about. We've seen protesters from the age of 13 being used, but they put the kids in the front line. So if something happens, and the police use tear gas or rubber bullets, they can turn around and say they were shooting at kids. So they drive that extra narrative to show that the police are now privy to protect the white people, and they are shooting just black kids. But they do that on purpose. That's the oldest strategy that they have used, even since the time of the Anglo-Boer War and that stuff. I mean, Blood River. There was I'll explain it to you on another sitting, how they used the figure of bull horns, where they would put the youngsters in front, but they still use the same tactics today to protect them. But in any riot, any protest, you will never see anyone above the age of, say, 45. All the old people know what it's about. And if you go on the internet, and it's widely available now, it's become such a tendency that the older generation of black and colored and Indian go onto the internet, they go on WhatsApp, they go on Facebook and all of these social platforms, and they utter the truth, that they say they don't understand what's happening in South Africa. Everything was better. Everybody had a job. We are now currently under this administration. For the past 30 years, we are at an all-time low of unemployment. I think it's way in the 30s, if I'm not mistaken. It might be higher. Asia knows more about that. But that is the problem. And that's why we have such a crime-ridden. It's all over. It's a mess. Because we are 61 million people, if I'm not mistaken, and there's only about, I think, I can't remember, I had it somewhere, of people that actually pay tax. There's a small percentage of taxpayers in this country, and the majority are unemployed. So what are they going to do? And Asia said it earlier on. They're going to break in. They're going to steal. You must understand, this is a father. He's got kids at home. This is a mother. She has a baby at home. She needs formula. So she's going to steal. So it's an ongoing flipping mess.
David, it sounds like you're actually touching on a problem that, from a historical perspective, we've seen play out in many cultures. Is that one form of government, right? One house of governance, the people, for one reason or another, decide to destroy. They decide to tear it down. Sometimes for more legitimate reasons, sometimes not, historically speaking. But the issue is that regardless of why they tore down the old structure, when they rebuilt, they failed to build on a strong foundation. And a matter of fact, what they built, they pretty much built on the sand, right? Because it has no foundation, it has no support. And this is something we do see repeated throughout history, even when the old structure did deserve, for a number of reasons, to be torn down a bit or be reworked. They, for whatever reason, just decided to build upon the sand without a foundation.
But the foundation that they had, they are demolishing by themselves now, because people are finding out the truth. And this right here, this was the foundation that they built on, or that they started to build on, but it's full of cracks because I can't prove it.
Kevin, sorry, I just want to bump in, and I don't want to waste your time, but for me, apartheid, the other day I was talking to a lot of Germans that was very anti-apartheid, and I said to them, you know, my mom always said, if you put something on somebody else, you must be willing for them to put it onto you. So I said to them, please put apartheid on my people. Do exactly what we've done on us now, because then we will have our own country where we live. You will build all the hospitals, all the roads, the stations, the schools. You will fund our government, and we will rule ourselves, and we will not pay for a thing. That was apartheid. So today we just asked to put apartheid back on all our Afrikaner people, and we will build our own schools. You don't need to pay for anything. We are doing it at this stage anyway. We're building our own universities, our own schools, our own hospitals. We're doing it on land that's not really ours because it belongs to you. So my method always say, you and I know as Christians, it is not right to tell the people because of the color of your skin, you're not allowed to stand in this queue. I get that. But that was small apartheid. But the essence of apartheid, bring it back, put it on us, and we will love to rule ourselves under our own rules that we put on you. Because then you are not allowed to buy any land. It is only the people that was given that land, the Zulu people, the Xhosa people, at Lesotho, Swaziland, but Botswana. We were not allowed as whites to buy their land or to start businesses there. We really looked after them. We will look after ourselves. Just give us our own country back.
So Billy, I'm actually about to go to you because I was going to ask you, Billy, because I'm coming at this solely from a perspective where I'm just familiar with American history, right? With everything. Billy, you're an American like myself, but you've actually educated yourself on a little more on South Africa and apartheid. So I know I'm speaking from my familiarity with American history. So Billy, what's your take? Like, when people draw the comparisons between segregation in America and what apartheid was, Billy, what's your response as an American who's also educated himself on South Africa and apartheid?
Well, let me start by saying this is there was one time where I looked up to Nelson Mandela as a mentor, and I thought, he was somebody who spent so much time in prison and came out and forgave all the people. Everything was kumbaya. And I learned quickly, I never questioned myself as to why Nelson Mandela was in prison in the first place. And it's not because of trying to go against the apartheid government. I mean, South Africa has a constitution that's very similar to ours, and they believed in freedom of speech, and they allowed the protests against apartheid until they got violent, mind you. Then something had to be done.
Which Billy, actually, I want to jump on that quick because you're actually giving, just like David did earlier and SJ did earlier, you're giving us the perfect segue to move into our next slide, which is, of course, Nelson Mandela, who he was, and a bit of a discussion about this man, and from American perspective, but obviously also more importantly, a South African perspective as well, because when it comes to Nelson Mandela, and I have this quote right here that's attributed to Mandela, which reads, "Racism must be opposed by all means that humanity has at its disposal." So growing up, as I said earlier, Nelson Mandela, my education about him, and Billy, you said you looked up to him yourself, was that this was a man who fought for the equality and the unity of the races. That this is what American children are taught when it comes to Nelson Mandela. That, and we have a reference for the Mandela effect, which is a whole different thing. But sorry, so continue, Billy.
Before we move on to this subject fully, too, there was just something about apartheid that I thought was very important to mention. Is I think if you search somewhere on YouTube, you'll find an old lady who I believe now is deceased, but she's Afrikaans and talked about growing up on the farm during the apartheid era, and it's quite interesting. And I think this happened on several farms in South Africa, depending on whether you lived, in the Eastern Cape or you lived in KwaZulu-Natal. Her father worked with a lot of Zulus, and they worked together in the farm and did a lot of trading. And for 2 years, mind you, would you do this with people you hate? I highly doubt it. For 2 years, he forbid his family to speak English. He forbid his family to speak Afrikaans and said, "We're going to work with these people. You're going to learn Zulu," and made them learn Zulu out of respect for these people that they're working with. And at the same time, I don't know if Zulus were learning Afrikaans, but I know they were learning English. But and I believe this has happened on several farms in the past in South Africa, where the family, the head of household say, "You're going to learn Zulu or you're going to learn Xhosa." And one other thing, just to add to going back to the tribal war, the Khoi and San people were the original indigenous people of the of Southern Africa. I mean, going from South Africa, Namibia, Angola, the Khoi and San people. The Xhosa people, their name alone, just to tell you how vicious the Xhosa were, their name alone is it's a Khoi or San word meaning angry people. And that was Nelson Mandela's tribe.
Which, thank you for bringing us right back around to Nelson Mandela, because I want to throw this to SJ and then David. I just explained to you gentlemen how, as an American child, what I was taught about Nelson Mandela. I have this quote up here. As I said, he was seen as a man who fought for racial equality and also racial unity. This is how we are taught. SJ, I'm gonna throw, and Billy said that he once looked up to him himself. SJ, I'm gonna throw it to you. What's your response to that? Hearing someone say that this is how we learned about Mandela. What's your personal take on Mandela?
I had the privilege to take tours. I'm a cultural guide as well, so I take tours with foreigners to Soweto, to the house that he lived in, and the whole rights and everything there. So I really did a lot of study on this. Nelson Mandela, he stole, when he was a youngster, he stole 2 cattle from his king, his Xhosa king, sold it to white farmers, English white farmers, and used that money to go to Joburg. Now, those days, the British still today control the mines. and they had arrangement with the chiefs. So the chiefs will send their indunas to work on the mines for 2-3 months, and then they will come back. But the mines is paying the chiefs. So Mandela had a problem. He was working on the mines for a few months when the chiefs realized that Mandela is there, and he was obviously wanted by his king for stealing his cattle. So then Mandela fled, and never in his life he was welcome in his hometown because he was seen as a thief. He obviously was seen by leaders of the ANC, a very peaceful organization in those days. And he saw a good leader, Nelson Mandela, and paid for his studies and everything. So now you must remember, on the high days of apartheid, Nelson Mandela started to become a lawyer, not in London, wherever, in South Africa. He opened his lawyer's firm in the middle of Johannesburg, and he was free to operate as a lawyer under this cruel racial apartheid government. He was free to go wherever he liked and do whatever he liked under his business in South Africa. And then he became the youth leader of the ANC. And he took the ANC to a military basis. He founded the Umkhonto Sizwe. He went to Moscow. He studied there about on all the wars, the way revolution works, the communist revolution that Malema talked about. Mandela brought this to South Africa. And the reason why he went to jail was because of the communist revolution that he planned in Rivonia. So he was always been a strong communist. This very angel lookalike thing that the West actually branded him was never part of who Mandela was. And I will just end by this. I had a great conversation with Dr. Rina Venter, who was in the government of F.W. de Klerk. And she said the reason why F.W. de Klerk resigned in this big government of National Mandela was that Mandela wasn't willing to see him, to make an appointment with him. So he actually resigned. So that for me was the biggest proof that Nelson Mandela never withdraw from violence. He never said stop violence. He always believed violence could be an option. And even when he was president and ruled this whole country, he was so anti-white, anti-Afrikaans, that he was not willing to see F.W. de Klerk because he was representing the white in South Africa. So I never think he ever was a believer of what everybody and he was selling to the world. I think he always been a communist. He just knew why would you stir when you're actually running the whole country.
Real quick, Kevin, I just sent you an image that I think you might want to share on the screen as well. I think it's very important to what SJ was just talking about. So, yeah.
No, I see that. My computer has issues when I try to share my screen for some reason. But yeah, I see Fidel Castro and hugging.
If I can do it from my end here.
Yeah, hugging Nelson Mandela. Yeah, no, I see that. And I mean, to reiterate, this isn't what we learn of Nelson Mandela here in America. You know, this is not an image that we are given, at least in my experience, by any stretch of the imagination. And it's honestly not like it's a large section of our education, or at least it wasn't mine to begin with. But the little segments I was given about Mandela was obviously very different. But during that, while Billy tries to, if he's still trying to,
I think all you got to do is accept it. But really quick, Kevin, I just want to add on to what SJ was saying too. It wasn't just about the communism that SJ was talking about there. Why Nelson Mandela ended up on Robben Island. But let's not forget about a bunch of bombs that were set off that, he filed the paperwork on and caused a great big explosion. And either David or SJ can expand on this a lot more than I can. But yeah, he set off a bunch of bombs, mind you, that killed more black people than I think very few white people. He killed a lot of people, and that's why he ended up on Robben Island.
I do want to get a little bit of a response from David first, and then we can expand the conversation. David, what's your overall response to this discussion when it comes to Mandela?
The day that the world met Mandela was like NASA's moon landing. It was all planned. It was a hoax. Just for the simple reason that he was not in prison for 27 years. He was actually out of prison 3 years prior to 1994, staying and living in the warden's house. And the proof is out there. People can go and search it on. So the whole dramatic thing was constructed for the people to meet this freedom fighter now. Yes. That what Billy just mentioned is absolutely the truth. There was the big battle between the ANC trying to rise to power pre-1994 against the IFP, and you can go and look at that documentary that I mentioned earlier on by the name of Tainted Heroes, and you will see the gruesome and the brutal murders that the ANC committed on the IFP in their struggle to be the powerhouse that it needed to be for the upcoming elections. One of the biggest things that memorials that are every year that's being kept in South Africa is the Church Street bombing of one of our SANDF buildings, where a lot of people died, were mortared, and just seriously injured. We commit every year to visit that Church Street bombing site. A lot of people, as I said, got hurt and lost their lives in that senseless bombing. But there was a lot of other bombings. They bombed train stations. They bombed shopping centers. There's this one instant, I can't remember the youngster's name, but he got his instructions from the ANC top leaders like Mandela, where in one of our coastal cities they had a restaurant bombed, and the youngster that actually bombed that place under the instructions of Mandela, they named the road after him. They made him into somewhat of a hero for that execution of those people. But the majority of everything that you know regarding this guy is fake news. The day he came out of prison, they rushed him to a stage where he did a powerful speech calling for the calmness and people to stop the violence. The very next morning, he was back on the same stage calling for the violence and slaughter to go on, because they need to elevate the tempo that they were on.
So, I was going to ask SJ if he wants to add anything to that. But Billy, go on.
Well, one other important thing to point out too is I watched some movies about Nelson Mandela in the past, and especially there's the one with Sidney Poitier and Michael Caine, and they talked about the Inkatha Freedom Party. Another one, they talked about the Inkatha, making the Inkatha Freedom Party look like horrible monsters that committed such horrible acts, and how F.W. de Klerk went behind Mandela's back and armed the Inkatha Freedom Party. The truth is, that's when I decided to take a closer look into the Inkatha Freedom Party, and this is what I found out. The Inkatha Freedom Party is a right-wing party that are anti-communist. And well, you can't go with the narrative of communism. You got to go. That's the way Winnie Mandela and the rest of them took to it. So they came up with something they call necklacing, and which is another horrible way to die. And yeah, they were murdering members of the Encarta Freedom Party via necklacing and shooting them or killing them with machetes and whatnot. So that's what made me think right there. You know, I'm sure the Encarta Freedom Party is not 100% innocent, but if they were taking up arms against the ANC, gotta see why. They were getting tired of being slaughtered.
Yeah, the necklacing is still practiced today. Not on such a big scale anymore, but it is still practicing today. Just to give our listeners somewhat of an idea what a necklace would be, they would hog tie a person and they would put tires around your neck, and they would put gasoline within the tire, and they would set you alight.
What was the quote from Winnie Mandela? With our matches and our tires, we will liberate this country.
Yeah, exactly that.
I just want to say something, Kevin. I think which is very important to realize, specifically they're very different from you guys in the US. South Africa is a tribal state. There's nothing like black people. They are divided in very strong tribal ethnicity. They speak different languages, different religions, different histories. There's a huge difference between the specific tribes. And the only way that the communists with their ANC plan can take over and keep the government going in South Africa is to focus on a racial concept, to fight apartheid. As soon as the whole thing of against whites can disappear, South Africa will fall into tribal fights all over again. That's how it started. That was before the whites came here. We brought peace to South Africa by stopping the tribal wars. And that's the main reason why the ANC is so hanging on to apartheid. It's not to fight the whites. It's to keep the tribes calm and fight for the black nationalism. So as soon as the black national thing starts falling apart, the tribals will take control. And that's why we believe that the only way going forward, if we really want peace in South Africa, this is not a black-white thing. We are different tribes, and we need our freedom and space to rule ourselves. And as soon as we have that, we can work together in confederal states. And so the future of South Africa is very important. What's going to happen in the next 2 years is going to bring peace or absolutely chaos in South Africa. And the role players will be, hopefully, the people that will take charge in this, this vision. If not, this country will go up in flames, exactly what Malema is saying. And he's predicting exactly the future as an alternative. If the MK party of Zuma, which is the third largest party today, which is today the official opposition in this country, backed by the EFF, there's no way of giving peace and freedom in South Africa. We will go up in flames, and you will see it. And that's the reason why your president is helping us to get to America. Because obviously, he advises, he's seeing exactly the same thing that I'm telling you now. This country is going up in flames not far from now. And we will flee, neither to Europe or America at this stage. The only alternative is if everybody stay calm, and we have a vision of a modern apartheid, to call it what you like. If different nations live together, ruling themselves, and I would really like to share something very important to you. A few months ago, there was a farm murder court case in Naboomspruit in Limpopo. So me and Johan was there on behalf of the Brenda Horner Foundation. So this guy that killed the farmer was standing in the court, and the judge, he approached the judge and said, listen, I must go out because I'm studying to become a traditional doctor, and that traditional doctor with the people that's working with him. As Christian, I believe the demons is throwing my grandma, my kids on fire because he's angry, because I can't study, because I'm in jail. So me as a Christian Western guy, I think, I'm so sorry, but you'll rot in jail until you find guilty. But for that African, that traditional healing thing is as strong and powerful as my Christianity is. So we're sitting in Africa, in South Africa, as a conflict of specifics, way of thinking, the way of our lifestyles. We can't push this together. It's not fair for a Western judge to judge an African guy who don't believe in the ways that we do. And the only way that we will have peace if we can break it up and let the people breathe their culture, their religion, and their freedom.
So SJ, on that though, which by the way, thanks for expanding on that. I guess what I'm asking you then, for the sake of Americans who are trying to make comparisons here, would you then say that it's a better thing to compare here? Wouldn't it be to compare African blacks to American blacks in that history, but would actually be more ideal to compare the history of Native Americans in America to black Africans because of the tribal relationships? Would that be a more accurate comparison?
Absolutely. And I want to share beautiful history with you exactly in that way. A lot of people knows about the Blood River because it's a black-white thing. At the end of the day, after the Battle of Black River, Dingaan was killed and the Zulu nation was running into the mountains. A few years later, King Twalitini became the king of the Zulus. And he said to the Boers, let's meet at the same middle spot of the battle. And he came there with the farmers that was fighting against him. And he said, listen, let there be peace between the Boers and the Zulu people forever from now on. Only two things that we must realize. Never ever have a war, but if you want somebody to work for you, it must be a Zulu guy. Very interesting, a few years later, the two princes was fighting for the crown of the Zulu kingdom. This one prince came to General Meyer, who was a Boer general, and said to him, please help me fight against this other prince. So for the first time in Africa, the Boers with their rifles and the Zulus with their assegai, they went in battle together against the opposition prince, and they've won the battle. A lot of people don't realize this. And the king, the new king then of the Zulus, gave northern KwaZulu-Natal to the Boers, and the Boers founded the Republic of Vryheid, which later became part of the Transvaal. That is what's happening in South Africa. Some of the tribes, there was a fight, a battle, Vegkop, when one tribe came and attacked the Voortrekkers and stole all their cattle. So they were stuck in the middle of Africa with the ox wagons without any cattle. The other tribe came and gave them their cattle so that the farmers could go on into Africa with their cattle. There is always been amazing relationship between a lot of beautiful tribes, between the farmers, the Boers, and the black tribes. I myself grew up in the northern tip of South Africa, next to the Botswana border, and there were no racial tension whatsoever in the early 70s. I can promise you that. The racial tensions in South Africa started with a communist agenda, using Mandela as a person and later the ANC in a revolution to untopple the government to become a communist state. And that is where we feel so betrayed by the Americans. You as Americans was fighting with us in the 70s on the border war with Dutch West Africa and Angola. You were with us. The CIA was actually sponsoring us. And 10 years later, you're slowly but surely backing off and supporting the ANC. And that's what we as South Africans felt so betrayed by the Americans. And now you can realize how amazing it was for us when a president like yours stood up and said, listen, I realize and I remember the Afrikaners in the southern tip of Africa. And that changed everything for us.
So
if I can just quickly add there,
yeah,
with that issue just said with the Americans turning their back on us, it was in the early 80s, and that's also on the internet. People can go search it, where Biden said in this one Congress meeting, he said that we have to destroy what is happening in South Africa. This whole apartheid thing, we have to destroy it. It's not working.
Yeah.
So just to add some more context there, we know where it came from, the betrayal.
so
sorry, Kevin. The last thing, remember when Reagan and Thatcher was the leaders in the Western world, they were not openly supporting the apartheid government, but they were backing us. The problem started when Thatcher left office and Clinton took over. That's where America, with the liberals, slowly but surely backing us from up. Thatcher called Mandela a terrorist. Reagan was really supporting us as far as he could.
So I do want us to jump into specific examples of the farmers, because actually that's very, you mentioning that relationship between America and South Africa during that era. We can definitely come back to that, because that's actually will fit in perfectly in a few slides. I do want us to dive into 3 examples that we have of farmers, of attacks on farmers. The first.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
We've been going. I know this is such a broad topic, and I knew that going in. Billy's like, trust me, you could talk for hours and hours and hours, and absolutely. But I want to get to these clips because I really want to play them back to back, and then have you guys respond to them, and then go on to a third attack specifically that actually you gentlemen made me aware of. So with that, here is the first clip.
According to police figures, 71 people were murdered on South African farms in the year to March 2017. But farmers say that figure doesn't reflect the full extent of the violence.
The one bullet went through here, went through there, through the chair into the wall there.
In February, armed robbers stormed this farmhouse and opened fire. Estelle Nieuwenhuizen's partner was shot repeatedly at close range.
I was shot 2 times there. One here, and the other one went in here. And it went out at the back of my neck.
The attackers tried to take one final shot at Bertus Henrico's head, but the rifle jammed.
I can't get that out of my head, because I believe if that shot went down, the next one was for me.
The robbers escaped and are still at large. Estelle and Bertus have upgraded their security, including an electric fence. But they are left wondering at the motive for the attack. Was it an opportunistic robbery or race-based violence?
Yeah, I am very angry because we haven't done anything to anybody. Why? What is the reason?
I cannot explain it. It's hatred from them. And the most thing they want to do is to disarm our white people. They want our guns, they want our money, and they want our land.
So before we move on and watch the next clip and then address these clips together, I want to actually quickly ask SJ and David, is this specific incident familiar to you gentlemen? This is the video clip I found is actually from 7 years ago. I was just curious if either of you were aware of this specific incident, this specific attack.
Yes, I was. And I think, at the end of the day, every time I hear like this week, a farm murder, I was actually praying that the guy was just shot and killed. It is really so bad. And it's actually nice to know that at least he went quick. The ANC is well known for intimidation. They got this country by intimidating their own people. The farm murders is all about intimidating our people to flee. and to get away, stop farming, run away, run to America, run wherever. And they really believe that if they take the farmers away, that they will be able to farm on their land. They can't even see what happened in Zimbabwe, where every white farmer was pushed away. They starve. The farmers is giving the food in South Africa. If you take them away, they will starve, and you know what will happen then. So for me, this is actually a kind way of approaching the farmers. Just a few shots and whatever, take their weapons and don't kill them. This is not what's happening in South Africa.
With this next clip, because I know you gentlemen, one of the things you told me is that this actually is an issue that's impacting farmers in general, and you know, in a broader scale as well. So I wanted to keep that in mind with this next clip, which is more recent. I believe it's about a year old, and then I'd like to get both of you gentlemen your collective response to this. Oh, just to clarify for the English speakers, there are parts of this clip that are not in English, but there are subtitles.
Yes, goed. Ons leef. Ek is in die kop geskiet.
Jan Tamboer says he has vivid memories of the day when 4 thugs stormed the farm near Jeffreys Bay last year. They ransacked his house, stole money and food, and brutally assaulted his wife. Tamboer, who was also shot in the head, says he now has to look after his wife, whose leg had to be amputated after the attack.
Hulle het ingeval in die huis en ek het gehoor hoe hy moet hulle praat en vra vir hulle. Wat maak julle dan nou? Kom julle dan in die deur, julle klop nie. Julle kom so onverskillig in. Hulle het gesê dat maak nie saak nie. Ons kom in. En hulle het ingekom. En toe hulle in die huis inkom, het hulle in die kamer ingegaan. Toe sien ek nie, dit is hierdie mense. Is nie mense wat vir mense vir ons wil kom keer nie. Dis maar anders.
2 of the culprits were arrested, and on Friday they were handed sentences of up to 30 years in prison. David Fallon, a community activist, says he fears that more of these attacks are contributing to farmers and their workers to quitting the sector.
There's a family from Hankey. The husband was away. The attacker came, shot his way into the house, raped the mother, attempted to rape the daughter, attempted to get the son to rape his sister. And he was eventually caught and tried. I was privileged to be in court when he was sentenced. I think he got 30 years, not enough. But that family, through the trauma, sold up the farm and they've moved to Australia.
All right. So first, to start off, before we examine them both together, for SJ and David, are you aware of this? This was a year ago, at least, is when the video was posted to YouTube, where I found it. Are you aware of this news segment and these stories?
Kevin, I don't. Not this specific one. You must remember, there's over close to 2,000 of this.
No, I know.
Yeah, there's people that's not really killed. We go to people that's we really killed and slaughtered. And I think the one thing that, if you listen to over 2,000 people that was killed, not 5,000 people that was attacked, because this people was kind of attacked. This is nothing else than terrorism. There's no way that you can say it's just a murder, or this is terrorism and intimidating the farmers as far as you can, and that nothing makes sense. This people is peaceful people. They live in harmony with all the workers that that work for them. Because, you know, at the end of the day, if the farmer is killed, nothing is happening on that farm. They lose their jobs. They have got nowhere to go. So it's not just the farmer that is taken out. All that people lose their jobs. And that's where the food crisis in South Africa is becoming a reality.
So I do want to clarify that part of the reason I did choose these news clips was in part, it was because I did want the voices of survivors. Just because I feel like that resonates a bit more when you do, as you said, you know, when a farmer is killed, right? It has that large impact. But I feel like we've become a culture. I'm not sure. I can't speak to South Africa. That when there's an actual murder to a degree, it becomes a back and forth of imposing their own story on the individual who was murdered, right? What actually happened, theories and stuff and stuff like that. Or at least motives are then. I feel like a voice of a victim who survived an encounter resonates, is, you know, a great deal as well. And that's why I did specifically focus on it with these two clips. I do have specifically a murder to reference, a tragic one that you gentlemen actually informed me about, which we will get to in a minute. But I do want a collective response to these clips together before we go there. Actually, I'm gonna go, David, to you first. What's your response to these clips? I'm guessing this is a story that just for you gentlemen is just heard over and over again at this point, these types of stories, except you're actually dealing with lives lost quite regularly as well.
Yeah, if people would see the amount of video evidence, photos of the farm attacks that we have on record, they would be horrified. I promise you there will be a lot of people that will not be able to sleep. Just the brutality that is being used. And then there's nothing being stolen. It's just plain murders. Like, for instance, the Burger family, they came home from church, the father, mother, and daughter. The father was stabbed to death with a garden fork. The little 2-year-old girl was picked up by her hair and shot in the head. They made the mom open the safe. She opened the safe. They shot her. They killed her. They didn't steal anything. They just left. It's things like that that don't really hit the mainstream media. Some farm murders get more attention, but it is in specific circumstances, like the Brenda Horner, because he was so young and he was a prominent figure in the Paul area where he worked for another commercial farmer. And things like that, especially when it comes to a young farmer, it tends to grab more attention. But the majority of these brutal acts that are being done to the farmers, they will never hit the mainstream media. Up until recently, the rest of the world did not know what's going on here. It only started to get the attention it deserved after Donald Trump made his statements on national TV and Twitter and stuff like that. That's the only way that it's got the attention. Otherwise, I think if he didn't do it, whoever brought it to his attention, it wasn't AfriForum in the first place. They only did it afterwards. But the first people that brought it to his attention, when was this? 2015, or when was it when he made the first statement?
2013 was the earliest dated tweet that I had.
So he has prior knowledge from 2013, and now only it's become a mainstream media where everybody's getting in this and getting on the story, and now the ANC is running around. They're trying to stop this, and they won't stop this.
I want to make
a response. Sorry, Kevin. I've just got to respond to your two clips. This is typical of the thing that you will see globally and in South Africa about farm murders. This is not farm murders that you shown. There's people that was attacked. And everybody thinks this is farm murders. If you can speak after what happened, that was not a farm murder. If I share the stuff to you that I saw, how brutally they are killed, I will send to jail because I am seen as a terrorist thing. So we are not even allowed to show the people what we see. So that's why the clips that you show, it's really not shocking to me, because it's just what the whole media at this stage is trying to make of farm murders.
And I knew that it wouldn't be shocking to you gentlemen, and it probably not even Billy, but I do know that for Americans who are just being introduced to this, these stories of victims is that gateway to an understanding. As I was, and that's another part of why I chose those clips. And then there was also the fact that when I was doing the research, I did find the clips that show what you are describing. They absolutely did. As I said, I first wanted these voices to be heard by the Americans who will listen to this, to connect to the stories of those who survived attacks, and then hopefully that will lead them to inquire more, to learn more about the murders and what has happened. Like I said, we are actually going to discuss a specific murder in a couple minutes here. But also, I do know that there are elements out there who will take every opportunity to try to get something taken down that highlights this. And I also will admit I kept that in mind as I was selecting the clips, which Billy, thank you for putting this image up.
Okay, so let me emphasize on this image alone, because I did take into account what SJ just pointed out, that if we show some any photos from an actual farm attack or farm murder, there, David and SJ could get in trouble. This particular image is not from a South African farm murder. This was actually back in the mid-'80s in Los Angeles by the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez. If you're familiar with that serial killer. Well, doing my research, the farm murders that are committed, that compare to anything in the U.S., probably compare the most to Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. This was one of his crime scenes. Let's just say that a farm crime scene in South Africa looks similar or worse than this.
And from the clips I did find that were from actual murders in South Africa of farmers, absolutely, I can say that it's definitely been an educational experience in horror and terror. I do want to move us forward to an actual murder, though, if you gentlemen are ready. You gentlemen made me aware of this tragic murder of this young girl. And that is Kayla Meyer. This I got a screenshot from her memorial page, and the description reads, and reading this mostly for American audience, Kayla Meyer, a 9-year-old girl, was murdered in a farm attack in South Africa in March 2016, along with her family. Kayla was tied up with wire, assaulted physically. I don't want to get us hit, but grape, as some streams say, and then brutally beaten to death with a spade.
Well, clarify, a spade is a shovel.
Yeah, you gentlemen made me aware of this. I tried to hunt it down. I found a video clip, but I lost track of it. Of her school did a ceremonial event for her fellow students, and if I recall correctly, this did lead to a protest, right, in 2017. Was it? There was a march, I believe, or something in South Africa. So I'm going to throw it to SJ and David, because obviously I'm guessing you gentlemen remember this case in greater detail. Is this the reality that you're speaking to, SJ? Obviously can't show specific image, but this is example of the reality you're speaking to.
Yes, absolutely. And the horror of this whole thing is I saw the pictures of small blood ants on the walls, and you can actually, while you walk through the house, you know, the story comes to you. And for me as a South African, I'll always remember my grandfather said to me one day, just remember, my son, we live in a European state today, but always remember you are part of Africa. And I think that's the big difference between the Europeans and, with all due respect, with the Americans as well. Africa is a hot, dark continent. And if you bring light and want to build a country, but your farmers is spread all over the countryside, vulnerable to whoever wants to kill them or want to work with them. It's all built on relationships. And from the day we move out from the Cape, we were focusing on our commandos. Our whole history, our commandos keep ourselves safe. With every attack in the Great Track after the republics, and the commandos was stopped by the ANC government as soon as they take power. And my plea will always be, if I had 1 minute with Donald Trump, and I will beg him one thing: help us to give our own commandos back, because the commandos will keep our people safe on the farms. They work day and night. They are on the fields most of the time, and the vulnerable is the wife and the kids. And you see, there was reaction, there was response. And I know you had a lot of videos as well. We run from the Brenda Horner Foundation. Me and Johan went from the north to the south, west and the east with thousands of farmers, with tractors and lorries and protests and speeches and flags, and we did whatever we could. Every time there's a farm murder, we would go out there, wave flags, go to the funeral, get the community involved. But you know, nothing is making any difference to us. The government still don't want to see this as a priority. And the only thing that will save our farmers is our own commandos under our own rule.
I also say something too regarding this too, and especially when it comes to farm attacks, and they have very young victims like Kayla here. Is not all of this is racially motivated. I think the media helps blow that up to, you know, just to get people all pumped up. But the truth is also there's weird rituals behind these things too. And we need to emphasize too that South African farm victims are not all white.
Well, that clip, one of the clips that we just watched, we saw that demonstrated.
But there's witch doctors, or what they call the Sangomas, have these really weird beliefs in cannibalism. They believe that raping a baby, or even somebody like Kayla Meyer here, who's most likely a virgin, will cure AIDS. So they go on rituals, false rituals like that as well, that motivates a lot of this.
David, do you want to put, because I'm sure obviously this is something, you know, that personally for you you know, response to. For you, I'm guessing like with SJ, this is the more commonplace, or these are the stories that we don't see as much or aren't given as much attention.
The only thing that I will say in this regard, and I'm speaking as a father of daughters myself, anyone that harms an innocent child in any way, shape or form, in my opinion, has lost the right of life.
How's it said? Those who harm the most innocent among us should have a millstone put around their neck and thrown into the sea. I know I'm paraphrasing that. And even that sounds too kind for what was done.
I just wanted to say that's too kind.
Yeah, that sounds far too kind for especially what was done to Kayla here.
Yeah,
and so many other children, innocent kids. I mean, what do they know about the old people's wars? What do they know about apartheid? What do they know about racism? What do they know of any? This little child is playing with Barbie dolls, building sand castles, playing in the mud, singing lullaby songs, and she gets hurt like that. Her little life gets snuffed out.
Yeah, it's so horrific. So horrific. And that book that I mentioned that I have written by Ernst Roots goes into some horrible details that I'm not afraid. I'm going to share them with you right now, just in the lightest detail that I can. But there was one particular farm attack where they took the man and they tied him up with barbed wire to his recliner, and they cut out his eyelids and forced him to watch them sexually assault his wife. Then when they could no longer get it up, they sodomized her with shards of broken glass from a wine bottle. And they took their 6-month infant child and boiled him to death in hot water. I'm sorry. This is getting harder for me to talk about.
You know, understand? No, trust me. Without question, gentlemen.
I just want to give some reality here, and it's this is exactly what we are talking about. And 528 women and children was brutally killed like this since the ANC took over. Close to 2,000 farmers, men. And we all talk about farm murders. This is not just farm murders. Over 500 women and children was killed in the same way that Billy just informed us now. And that's why we are fighting everything that we can to give this message across to people like President Trump. Because we the only way forward is to get international help to bring our commandos back, to stop this kind of killings.
You know, I just want to say this for those who read or were listening when I was reading the description from the memorial page, to make note of the fact that she would be, I don't recall exactly when her birthday is, but she would be, if not already, 18 years old this year. She'd be a young woman starting to prepare to form her own life and family, her own dreams, her own career, family, all that stuff. And that's the reality that was taken from her by the evil, by the demons that are wandering around South Africa and doing these horrific and absolutely evil, demonic things, these murders torture. I just want to highlight that fact that this young girl, she is now frozen in time, and that she would be a young woman today, starting a whole new chapter in her life.
You know, and this goes for any child. I don't care about the color of the skin when it comes to a child. No one, you cannot hurt a child in any shape, form, or whatever you want to call it. It's unacceptable.
I just want to bring another angle to the conversation of what we're talking about, Kevin, if I may. You know, it's easy to make a black or white thing out of everything in South Africa, and that's kind of the narrative that they're playing with us. But if you go and see what's going on in the Congo, in the Rwanda, in Mozambique, this is nothing special what they're doing to us. I saw clips of the way they treat the different tribes in Africa when there's a war zone. They chop them with pangas and throw them. They do horrible things with each other. And we, as Europeans and Afrikaners, is in Africa. And we need to realize this is our home. So which way going forward? We are not in Europe. We are not in America. We are not a majority rule. And the problem of the black people is a minority. We are extremely small minority in South Africa. And we need to work something out, not just for us, but for the rest of the tribes as well. And one thing that Corneille Mulder said to me the other day is, we must remember we always have been a minority. And we survived for 400 years. And the reality of being in South Africa is what you showed us today. And maybe just for a little few moments, you can start realizing why there was something like apartheid in South Africa. Not just to keep us safe, but to have a strong government, to have a strong army and police force, to make sure that this is not happening to our farmers under our rule. And this was what we gave away to the ANC with F.W. de Klerk. We signed our power off, and this is the result.
And SJ, I do want to help relate that to Americans and the conversations we have here. And as we did earlier, reference to Native American, the tribal comparison, is that while there were indeed truly evil, horrific things, wrong things done to the tribes in America, in the Americas, there's also the reality that when Europeans came here, there were tribes killing tribes, cannibalism, child sacrifice. There were tribes conquering other tribes and wiping them completely out of existence. Now, like I said, what was done to the native tribes then by force of government was an evil. There was a number of evils done, but many times, and I can speak to the left here in America, there is this rewriting of history to enhance victimhood, to be like, in America, we have this idea of the noble native man, right? That's the image we are given, which true, there were those individuals, there were those tribes who were peaceful, but that is not the consistent story. It's not the consistent story of humankind, of mankind, let alone tribes in different parts of the world, including America and also South Africa. Sorry, Billy, go on.
Well, Esther just said, during apartheid, if apartheid was really, really so bad, let's think about the benefits that were provided during the apartheid regime. During that time frame, South Africa actually had a stronger economy than the U.S., and our economy was pretty good. The first ever heart transplant done in South Africa during the apartheid regime. The majority of black people as well as white people, of course, had jobs. It was all Nelson Mandela and the ANC wanting to bring on the communist regime and stirring up racial hatred. That I no longer have anything good to say about Nelson Mandela. He was a terrorist. He was a complete POS. He was a communist. And if he had it so bad during apartheid, then how was it that he became a lawyer? No,
Billy,
he planted the seed. He was a terrorist. He was nothing good.
Billy, and actually all you gentlemen, you've been touching on what is our next segment when it comes to this conversation. I didn't include them in this just because, well, partially for time's sake, plus I also knew we would discuss them, was that there were clips of Black Africans discussing the parts under apartheid where the communities were actually doing better, and taxes and all that were discussed in those clips. But I want to kind of bring a lot of this together because you gentlemen have explained to me on a number of times that, what we have going on here in South Africa. I believe you gentlemen actually shared this specific image with me. Or one of you did, I believe, is that, there actually are people from all walks of life in South Africa who are trying to bring attention to this and starting to speak out. And I know that probably some of them don't speak, some people don't speak out the way they should, or they pick and choose how they speak and where they speak. That you see that regardless of circumstances. But I wanted to ask you gentlemen, I wanted to ask SJ and David, what, for those Black Africans who are speaking out, who are making these statements, where are those what's the word I'm looking for, those unions, where are those the strongest? I mean, what's happening there exactly? Is there, I know SJ, you have given us many predictions for a darker future, at least coming up immediately for South Africa, but can you discuss where there's the unity a little bit more, where you have Black Africans and white Africans coming together to say this needs to stop?
I think the picture that you have here is Petrus. He spoke to a group in Parliament a few weeks ago. He's really crossing the country from farm murder to farm murder to try to I would say, to make this a non-racial thing. But the biggest crisis in South Africa is all the non-citizens from all over the African state that is in South Africa. Most, I would say, 90% of all the Zimbabweans is in South Africa. 30% of all the Mozambican peoples is in South Africa. And you will find, going to small towns, like small towns in the Western Cape, with 7,000 people living there. You will see people from Congo, from Rwanda, from Malawi, from Zambia. It's scary how all the Africans is flocking to South Africa. And they're taking a lot of jobs because they are hungry and they're eager to work. A lot of jobs of the South Africans. And there's much more tension between them as between the black and white. And I project the crisis in South Africa will first start with people without food, without jobs, without a way forward. And they will just start taking whatever they can, like we've seen in KwaZulu-Natal. But then the South Africans and the non-citizens will turn on each other, like you see in the rest of Africa. And that will play out in chaos in South Africa. It's not going to be a black or white thing, per se. Xenophobia is what they call it here.
And SJ, I just want to jump in there quick because to once again bring that home to America, I'm in New York State. And in New York City, As Billy touched on earlier, we've had the flooding across our southern border of illegals into America from all around the world, not just Mexico. And one of the things we've been seeing when they were sent to New York City, for example, are clashes between the illegals, between the migrants and the poorer communities in the city over resources. We saw this especially during the holidays last year, where resources were going to poorer communities, a number of them actually Black communities, and the illegals that the Biden administration sent to New York State, flew in at night, bust in at night, were starting to conflict greatly with those communities. And that had actually nothing to do with, to a degree, you weren't dealing with white communities at all. You were dealing with impoverished Black communities saying, no, we've had enough of this when it comes to illegals being put in their neighborhood and competing with them for jobs and resources.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. And for the reality in South Africa is, like I said, nobody knows, but we will have between 15 and 17 million people, non-citizens in South Africa. And if you take them out, the hospitals will be much better. There will be much more work for everybody in South Africa. But it's too late, because Nelson Mandela in person just open the borders and let everybody in. And you can buy an identity document, South African identity document now for 100, 200 Rand in the townships. So it's not even a process to become a citizen in South Africa. You just actually go and buy an ID document for you, a legal ID document, because the whole state system is a mess. So at the end of the day, the boiling pot in South Africa will be between the citizens of the Black citizens of South Africa and the Black Africans that is not citizens, or that border citizenship from his neighbor.
David, do you have did you wanna?
Yeah, the main fights between the Black people, specifically the Black South African, is they have a lot of internal fights with Blacks from way up in Africa that take their jobs over here. And the Blacks in South Africa refer to the ones across the border, they refer to them as Makwerekweres, outlanders. They're not supposed to be here. So you will see every now and again their shops will get burned down. They will get assaulted. They will get lashed. And I can see the frustration there as well, because of a lot of Pakistanians and Indian people. They employ they will rather employ the foreigners from Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique, or whatever, because they are cheaper labor, and they won't employ the South African Black, and that upsets them, because of they are also employed. They need the jobs. But however the case may be, there are plenty of fellow Black South Africans that do a tremendous job, and that are really great. I know some Black police guys that I will call them if it needs be, but there are some of them that are, and I would want to believe that the majority of that, and I'm speaking specifically about the older generation. I don't give two shits about the younger generation. Anything below 30 is a waste of time. I won't speak to them because of the influence that they had of the current administration and the other parties like the EFF. But the older generation, we can get along perfectly. They understand the system. They know what it's about. They know what it was, what it is now, and what the differences are. They see the problems for what it is, and they see who causes the problems. Then you get people like this Petrus, whatever his last name is. He's unemployed. He goes from farm murders to farm murders from town to town, and he lives off donations. He saw a gap, and he's been exposed by a person like Willem Petzer, for instance, who exposed him on his channel, where he interviewed him. And when he couldn't explain what he's doing with the money, the first thing he says, you are a racist, and you are this, and you are this. So there's a bit controversy regarding this Petrus, whatever his last name is.
Sitole.
If he does,
Sitole.
Yeah, Sitole. But if he does a good thing, good on him. I don't see the impact. I don't see that it's really positive. I see that it's a guy that saw opportunity to get something in his pockets to fill up his belly, because he was not this big when he started with this. He was a thin guy, and now he's a little bit bigger. So it looks like he's whatever he's doing is paying his accounts.
David, to add some levity, you're body shaming now. You're body shaming.
I don't care about body shaming. I speak the truth how I see it. And
sorry, that's just a quip from our leftist culture here in America. There's the whole body positivity movement. You know, big is beautiful, and you know, obese can't fit in a car is beautiful. So
the main thing is if you or Billy or Eshe or myself, if you put yourself out there as this person, you must uphold that image. You cannot waver to the left or waver to the right. Then you are contradicting what you are working for, and people will lose interest and trust in you, and you damage your own reputation. Walk a straight line, and you will get much further with people in life.
Well, I've noticed with these individuals, right? A lot of them, and I understand the pressures, but a lot of them, when they start out, they are more willing to take on everyone. But as they move along, right, as the money comes in, they're less and less willing to conflict. It starts with certain individuals close, and then it kind of branches out. They're less and less willing to challenge, others. That's the irony of it, is that a lot of people who start out preaching for a cause, fighting for something, as they become more well known, they actually, to some degree, depending on the individual, become less likely to challenge others than when they first started out, because the money has started to come in. And they especially don't want to upset their own side by disagreeing who has been supporting them to a certain degree. I don't know how applicable that is here. It's just something that I've noticed a lot with activists in all different kinds of circumstances, is they fear conflicting with those that align with them to a certain degree, so they won't challenge in any sense those they consider allies, or those who are lining their pockets and everything.
That is absolutely true. You will always see that people like this Petrus, whatever his last name is, they will only take it to a certain point, but they will not cross that threshold, because then they put themselves at risk with their own. I mean, look at a guy like Julius Malema now. He has put in an application for more police protection, because he fears assassination from some of the other white guy. Wow. Then don't say dumb shit. You won't be under risk of dying.
I think his own demise is going to be
his own hand.
Yeah, it's if somebody murders him, it's not going to be a white person.
No, it's going to come within his own ranks.
Yep, because he's not going to follow through on a promise he made, and they're he's going to have a debt they're going to come to collect.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is historically we've seen that individuals who reach that level of evil, eventually someone beneath them starts thinking, am I going to be next, and takes them out, or someone close to them. When someone reaches that level of evil, which clearly That's what we've seen here. When you proudly say, well, you know, when you proudly say a genocide of a demographic is a possibility you won't rule out, you've definitely reached that level of evil. And what's next to paranoia usually really sets in, even in your own circles. And there's purity tests that start to increase and all this stuff. And eventually that's where you see that betrayal, that often a killing by their own.
There's one thing that I don't understand. They keep on getting on stages and big platforms and big events, and they utter a bunch of nonsense constantly. The whites this, the whites that, the whites have the monopoly, and they have the money, they have the land and everything. Okay, so if you are so interested and so invested in the future and the upliftment of your own people, Ramaphosa, empty your bank account that has 8 billion or whatever amount in, distributed to your people. That will show leadership. That will show you actually care about them. Julius Malema, open your bank account and feed the hungry in Soweto. Go open a soup kitchen. Start feeding the hungry.
So but
they won't. Because the white man can do it. Because they have more money. Or they have all the money.
So, David, you mentioned the grabbing of land, and we've touched on that a couple times, but I do want to move that into the next segment, because everyone right now is centered on obviously there are the murders, there are the attacks, but the land is a huge focus right now. But I wanted to ask, in what other ways are laws being used to target people, specifically white farmers? And I remember once during one of our conversations, I believe one of you gentlemen made a reference to example like guns, right? Being able to defend yourself. I don't know if South Africa really has like something comparative to our Second Amendment, but could you speak to, and I'll start with you, SJ, to how laws in South Africa are being used to target?
Yeah, I think the whole bomb actually went from Trump saying this was because Ramaphosa signed the new legislation that you can take land, not just land, your car or anything, if department think governments need that. And I think that's the essence of what's happening. My sincere problem will not really an organized system by government by taking land. The message that went out by changing the constitution as far as private property is concerned is that you can actually go and take land. So the reality now, which is really happening all over the country, organizing groups, go and get 500 people, go to a farm and put up shacks there, and nobody can move them unless you give them another place to stay. And after a week, they demand electricity and water, and the government obviously provide that. So the risk now is, and I spoke to my family up north, they all have farms there. What are you going to do if 2 buses stop there and they build a few shacks on your land? You can't shoot them off. You can't bulldozer them off. The farmers can't get together and chase these poor people that don't have any place to stay from your farm. That's the reality. And that is what's slowly but surely happening. At this stage, they're doing it not on private land, but on municipality land. There's no stopping that. They just grab land wherever they want. But now, opening this up for farmland, that's the step that's going to take place now. People, and you will see that before the end of this year, they are well organized. They move into a farm area. They put up their shacks. You can't move them. And whatever you do, you will be the guy, the racial guy that's taking up militant options to create a new apartheid state. That's the reality where we are now.
It's, I guess, to use the saying, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of scenario. And while obviously not the exact same, once again, you're making me think of correlations here. We're seeing in certain cities where the poor demographic or drug demographics, the drug using demographics, they can go and set up in front of a shop or someone's house, and the person can call the cops and nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. The cops will actually say, I can't do anything. I remember one specific example where a gentleman was saying that he called the cops because there was someone using drugs right on his stoop. His children are in his house and they had a tent set up. The cops never came and in fact said they likely wouldn't make it out there. So this, to a degree, there's that understanding of the law. The law isn't there to protect the vulnerable. The law isn't there to protect those who are actually being targeted, those who are actually having their lives and their safety threatened.
South Africa is currently in such a state that private security companies are being hired to protect police.
That's wild.
Every police station has a private security company employed to protect the police inside.
That is bizarre. That is just.
And I think I just want to throw in here to the state in South Africa at this stage. And I'm very scared. I really like what Malema is doing. He's putting a lot of focus on Urania and Kleinfontein and our struggle and whatever. So for us, he's doing very good work. But the reality in South Africa is not Malema or the EFF. The reality, we are a criminal gangster state. We have groups like ISIS, very well organized in South Africa. We have training military camps in South Africa. So
Don't you also have China getting invested in communities as well?
Yeah. China has their own flipping police station in the city of Johannesburg. Their own police station in our country.
Yeah. They have the biggest embassy. They're bigger than America in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
But one thing that I can say about the Chinese is I've worked in Tanzania and Dar es Salaam for years as well. And I saw what China is really doing with the African countries. And they're much more sensitive in South Africa because I think the intel is correct. South Africa is not just a walkover state because we have ISIS inside, because we have all this Islam military groups forming. It's not Zambia that you just come and take over. It's a very complex situation on the verge of chaos. So I don't think South Africa is a very well organized state to welcome the Chinese. And although they are very involved with the government, they are very, very scared for what's going to happen in South Africa because they have the intel.
So I do want to quickly reference the comments because I'm seeing a comment from an Aura, I suppose. Oh, okay. Go, Billy. Sorry.
I put a message in on WhatsApp for a group that Colonel Chris Wyatt runs. Anybody who knows who he is, he's the only other American, probably other than myself, that has this kind of knowledge of South Africa. So we got some of his followers watching. I want to thank them for tuning in.
So, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate the comments. I've been monitoring them. Some of them, though, as you know, as you've been watching, we've been getting really into the conversations. So I've been monitoring them and trying to choose the ones that I think are most relevant at the moment. I see two comments. One states, apparently they are calling for all South Africans to say that they want to change the South African Constitution. They have until the 28th of May to respond. And the other one is it only gets more and more interesting. Everything you're saying is 100% the truth. Very captivating. Glad that you're opening the eyes of the world as to South Africa's truth. So I mean, again, I want to thank these gentlemen for coming on and having this conversation. We're going on 3 hours, and if you stayed with us as a viewer for these 3 hours, I definitely want to thank you, because it's certainly been a journey. It's been a roller coaster ride for sure. But with that in mind, I do want to move us on. We have 2 more topics to touch on. One of them we have been touching on consistently as we've been going along, so I don't think we're going to spend too much time on it. And this one, it's kind of going to be at first a little bit focused on Billy and me.
Sorry, just to interrupt you there. Just a last comment from me. I am going to have to leave you guys. I'm going to lose signal in a couple of minutes, it looks like. But just a last comment from my side, and sorry for me to cut it short, but I have another responsibility that I have to attend to now, because it's coming up to run about, well, very close to midnight probably. I don't know what's the time now. But anyway,
buddy,
South Africa is a beautiful place, and everything can work tremendously well. We all love this country, and we were all born here. We are children of Africa. This is our home, and for any one South Africa to chase another South African off his birthright is so stupid. This can be one of the greatest countries again, but something has to be done in the leadership of this country. And people, the biggest thing here is this apartheid issue and the racial issue. And the only way to get rid of this whole problem is, and I'm quoting an American. What was his name? Morgan Freeman. He said the only way to get rid of it is stop talking about it.
There we go. Yeah.
Morgan Freeman, who, if I'm correct, he actually played Nelson Mandela, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Invictus, yes.
Yeah. Ironically enough.
South Africa. But anyway, guys, I'm going to have to love you and leave you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it, but I have to go and attend to other
Understandable,
stuff.
David, and thank you for being with us this evening. Have a good evening.
Okay, cheers, guys. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye, buddy.
All right, so I figure this is a great opportunity. We've been discussing it for a while, I know. And we've been touching on, as we've been going, is the connecting of Americans to what's going on in South Africa. You know, we've touched on it earlier, SJ. We mentioned, comparing, it's more accurate to compare the Native American tribes and their history to Black Africans than it is Black Africans and their tribes to Black Americans, right? To the history of Black America. And also immigration. We've compared those. You just discussed the flood, the influx of immigrants into South Africa. And I touched on how here throughout America, we've seen the conflicts between poorer communities and these mostly illegals actually flooding our borders. And of course, we have affirmative action, we have diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think these are all ways that Americans can at least start to grasp what's occurring in South Africa. Billy, I'm going to actually throw it to you first, since we're both Americans here, making these connections.
Okay, so this is something I actually wanted to say earlier in the show too. Is you have people like Julius Malema who call white people colonizers, and white people stole their land or whatnot, which all of that is false. But if you really want to go on the immigration issue and those that migrated, honestly, like I said earlier, Southern Africa was not black owned to begin with. The Khoi and San people don't like being called black, and they do have a lighter shade of skin. The Khoi and San people were there first, and in the 1600s, Jan van Riebeeck showed up, and they had very good relations with the Khoi and San people. Black people came from the north of Africa after the white people did. So if we want to go by the term colonizer, the black people in South Africa are just as much colonizers as the white people, if you really want to go there. Because, I mean, yeah, they're on the same continent. That's been another argument somebody's thrown at me. But they're on the same continent. Yeah, but do you, just because you live up in Maine, does that give you rights to Florida? No, they're far away from each other. Far away from each other, and that's, sorry, you came from another land to another land, and to me, the black people are just as much colonizers in South Africa as the white people. The Khoi and San people are the original indigenous tribe.
Yeah. And Billy, to build on that, especially as I've had this argument so many times with leftists here in America, the history of the world is colonization, conquering, colonization, and even slavery. Every culture, if you go back far enough, has owned slaves or been slaves, shifting around, conquered a nation and been conquered. Often, for example, when there's arguments here in America about giving land back to the native people, I'm like, all right, which tribe though? Because this tribe was conquered by this tribe. So this tribe was there first. And then there was a tribe that was on this land prior to that before they had a war. So how far back do we go with getting this land back to the people?
Well, see, and that's the point right there too, is I actually am in communication with this one lady who lives in Philadelphia who's actually of San descent. And she put up a meme of a indigenous Khoisan person that said, "The white man stole your what? Oh, you mean the land you stole from us."
Brilliant.
Nice. And I think that's a perfect time to bring SJ in. So SJ, what Billy and I have been talking about, I mean, and what I mentioned earlier with the immigration and DEI, all that stuff, and in the tribes and everything, you'd say that there is a lot of fertile ground for Americans to be able to grasp what's going on in South Africa, at least beginning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the worst thing that ever happened to Southern Africa is the colonization by the British. The big difference between what they've done is there's still English-speaking people in South Africa, but they don't have British passports. So they are South Africans. Although they speak English, they are Boers. But then you've got a lot of English-speaking people that is actually citizens of Britain. I would say if you ever come to South Africa, please go to the Apartheid Museum. And it's very sad that they called it the Apartheid Museum, because if you walk out there, you will know one thing, that South Africa was absolutely messed up by the British. Nobody else, not the Boers, not the blacks, not the tribes. And even today, if you just come, which Billy is very correct in saying, that when the Dutch picture, 200 years before that, the Portuguese came, and then the Dutch. But when we actually start building houses and castles and get a society going, the Khoi and the San, we used to call the San the Bushman. I don't know, it's politically not correct anymore, and I don't know why, because we love them to bits. And the Khoi used to be the Hottentotte, which was the two groups that we found in South Africa. And we had a few squabbles and a few battles, and they burned down farms, and we sorted out. Today, the Khoisan and the Afrikaans people, they are all Christians. They speak Afrikaans, and they dominate the whole Cape Colony, organized by the British. But the southern area of South Africa, if we have an election now, that's why the Democratic Alliance is still ruling the Cape. And the ANC lost the majority in Northern Cape. So the Northern Cape, if you know South Africa, and the Western Cape is ruled, the majority is Afrikaans whites and Afrikaans colored people. There's not a lot of black people. The black people that stormed in here the last 30 years was sent here by the ANC to try to take the province. So that is the best truth that you can ever, it's not in the past, it's reality now. And there's a big movement called Cape Exit that want to split from South Africa. Because the only thing that would happen, according to the Constitution of South Africa and Article 235, if we have a referendum called by the DA government of the Western Cape, and we will win a referendum to become our own state, the state of the good hope of the Cape, we will rule ourselves. And it's a very popular stand, especially in America and the Western society, because they see the Western Cape as a very strong government on its own. It will be extremely nice place to stay. It's absolutely not just nature-wise, but there's a strong government with getting the credit for the Democratic Alliance. And then again, a lot of people think it's because of the Democratic Alliance that the Western Cape is ruled so well. And it's a half truth. When the ANC took over, all the other provinces, they couldn't take over KwaZulu-Natal. The IFP got it first, and they never could win the Western Cape. They ruled it in coalition for a few months and then took it over. So the whites and the colors is governing the Western Cape from day one. And that's the big reason why those people were not fired, that positions. And all the other provinces, the ANC just fired all the white people, put them on packages, and put people in there that couldn't do the job. And that's one of the main reasons why South Africa is falling apart, because the people can't do what they're supposed to do.
Exactly. I'm already friends with somebody whose father was an engineer with Eskom, and he had the full qualifications, to work on the grid in South Africa. But because he's white, they fired him and replaced him with the janitor who didn't know a damn thing about running the grid. Now what do you got in South Africa? Rolling blackouts, or as you call it, load shedding.
But can you imagine? I just want to fill in here. Sorry, Kevin. Can you imagine if South Africa was this big example for the woke people in the world? The whole liberal Western world was wishing for this. Give this country to the blacks in South Africa and they will rule it well. Well, it actually exploded in their face because they couldn't rule this well. They couldn't rule it at all. And now for us as conservative Christians with black people in South Africa can turn around, not just can, we turn around now in the liberals, in their faces, say, listen, you came with this liberal constitution, the most liberal constitution in the world. But South Africa is a total mess. So the only alternative is going back to the conservative ways of a respect between the different tribes and see what they want.
So, SJ, I kind of want to move us along because I feel like that's a perfect segue into the last slide. Because you've talked a lot about a bit of a darker days ahead, and this is really what I want to touch on here. Is I want to touch on the future, the next exit, right? You were talking about like I said, you were talking about those darker days ahead. And so my question initially on the outline that I sent you was about what's the future hold for South Africa, concerns and fears. And I feel like you've definitely touched on those throughout the stream, which you can briefly touch on them again. But after you do that, I want to ask you, Do you see signs of hope? And if so, what are those signs of hope?
Okay, I'll start with the hope. I think the best hope for me is shown that this whole liberal way of thinking that we said will never work in South Africa was shown correctly. It's not going to work. It's never going to work. So for me, as we came to an end of a lot of lies, a lot of propaganda, and a lot of liberal way of thinking. So at least we can start to sit down and start talking about the solutions. The near future for me is not because I'm afraid or anything, because we knew this is going to happen. But if I can throw the ball back to you and say, listen, if there's a country where there's no law and order, there's no justice anymore, there's no police, there's no army, there's 20 million people that don't have any jobs, any food to eat. There's a few farmers spread over the country trying to make food for all those people in this country. And at the end of the day, you have politicians running around and stirring up hatred. The reality is not that I'm white and I'm scared being killed by black people. The reality is, even if there was not one person in South Africa, this country, the possibility of this country going up in flames without any army or police force or foreign government that's willing to come and help us here, there's no way that South Africa will be sorted out in a meeting like Kudesa was 30 years ago, bringing the people together, because we build on sand. This country is built by the Europeans and the Americans selling this concept of us, of what they're trying to sell to you now. And at the end of the day, it's not going to work. And I always say, if we don't start with respect, and I, as an Afrikaner guy in South Africa, no, I need to share this country with all the other tribes. And I have respect for the Zulus and the Khoisas and the Vendas, whoever lives here. The only way that we will have a beautiful, prosperous future is if we start respecting each other and freeing it up so that everyone can be free. We are not in the same civilization. There's an African civilization, there's a European, there's tribals that differ from each other. One is not better than the other, but we differ. So to push everyone together, forcing them with all these laws and racial laws and politicians that's really stirring up hatred, how on earth are we going to build a peaceful future for South Africa? We need to turn around. First, we need to start respecting each other. Then we need to sit around the table. I can't see this happening until everything goes up in flames and we start having respect for each other through whatever is throwing and coming our way. It's too late to turn around now. It's over and done with South Africa.
You're talking what some people would describe as a reset or a building of a new foundation, because there is no fixing of the old. It's been damaged. No, I definitely I can see where you're coming from with that, but I think personally, even in that is where hope lies. That hopefully something good can come from that as well. I guess in that way I consider myself a pessimist to some degree, but I guess I am an optimist to some degree. Is that in the destruction of something, if there's enough strength and enough willingness, something great can also be built, something new, something strong, after what is beyond repair has been torn down and removed. So I do wanna thank you for that, expanding on that of what you see for the future. With that, we are at almost 3 hours and 10 minutes, and it's just been amazing with you gentlemen. I do have to feed the cat and walk the dog soon, so I do want to bring us back because I chose this thumbnail for a reason after I became educated on all the parts here. And I see very different, obviously, I guess that I don't want to use the word spectrum, but that all-encompassing image here in my mind. We have the evil, right? We have the great evil, and we have the innocent victim of that evil right here in my mind. And I am going to make this comparison, considering that the man we're dealing with here, it will not write off a genocide of a race, right? I will make this comparison that we're basically looking at versions of Hitler and Anne Frank to that degree.
Oh, real quick. Let me share a meme with you before we.
Sorry. Come on.
I shared this probably about a good 7-8 years ago. And yeah, here it is.
Sorry, my cat knocked my stuff over. Oh, it's not adding. I know the image. It's yeah.
I can see it on my side.
Okay, I'm not seeing it on mine.
Well, you have Hitler on one side raising his hand, Nazi salute, and on the other side you have Julius Malema raising the same hand, almost in a Nazi salute there.
Yeah, no, there it is. And seriously, I am not someone who makes these comparisons lightly. Let me be clear. I think, especially in America, the term Nazi and Hitler as an accusation gets thrown around way too much. Way too much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've already heard, there are people throwing it around. Everyone I hate is Hitler. But
yeah,
now Julius Malema does compare very well to Adolf Hitler. And then there was another man who, which I forgot his name, but he was within the ANC, and he said, we need to cleanse this country. We need to cleanse South Africa of white people like Hitler did the Jews and turn their children into garden fertilizer.
Yeah. So to reiterate, bring it back. Here we have a man who very aggressively practiced genocide, and another man who won't say no. Genocide isn't an option, right? A man who's like, I can't say. There might be a genocide of whites in the future. I don't know. Possibly. So, yeah, I think this is unquestionably, it's an accurate comparison. And once again, to bring it back to the victim of this evil, a representative of the victims, we have young Kayla here. And on that, which I know this was many years ago and she would be 18 this year, but I want to say my prayers are with her in heaven, and my prayers are with those who loved her, who lost her, and who didn't get to see her become the woman that she should have become. With that, I do want to quickly throw it to you gentlemen for your final thoughts to wrap up. I know that's asking a lot considering the topic and how broad it is. First, I'm gonna save you, SJ, for last to kind of wrap that up. But before that, I'm gonna quickly just say I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier. That for me, the biggest issue is the mindset that the way to address a perceived past evil is to take part in a new evil. This is what I think is the detriment of many societies, especially in Western societies here in 2025 in our world, is this idea that past wrongs can only be corrected by current wrongs. And I think that is tearing our nations, our world apart. With that, Billy, I'm going to throw it to you for your wrap up.
Well, like I said, I don't expect people here on our soil to do anything about this, but I ask you to acknowledge what's going on. I'm not saying you have to donate to South Africa or go over there and help or whatever it is. I understand we've got our own problems here in the United States, but we need to pay very close attention to what is happening on South African soil, because it can, and I say will happen here if we don't prevent it.
SJ, what's your well, not your final thoughts clearly, but your wrap up for this stream?
No, I just thank you so much, you guys, your president per se. If it wasn't for your president, we wouldn't be sitting here, and the impact that Donald Trump had on the reality of South Africa will never be realized by anyone that's not part of South Africa concept. My plea will be to every American, not just to get involved in what's happening in South Africa, but really pray for what's happening in South Africa and its future, to start off with that. And more than 600,000 Afrikaners already left this country for Australia, New Zealand, Europe, America. We have over 10,000 farmers that's already legally working in America. So my plea will be, if you can help a lot of people, and that's where I salute Donald Trump, get as much as possible of our people out of this country while we have the time. But please send them back. We have a lot of money to rebuild this country, because we will rebuild this country. We will ask all the people that left and got new skills in Europe and Australia and America. Bring your skills, bring your money, so that we rebuild South Africa as a super state in the southern tip of South Africa. But with your courage and your love for my country, I will always salute you, and specifically Donald Trump, your president.
Thank you so much, SJ, for once again, well, for that, and for also being our guest this evening, because like I said, I know we could go for so much longer, but I truly do appreciate it. SJ, is there any place where you'd like people to go and learn more about you, follow you on social media, or know about your work you do, or your activism and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'd love to. We have a foundation. Obviously, it's in Afrikaans we talk about stichting, but we've got a very nice website, www.Brendan Horner Stichting. It's STIGTING. So stichting with Afrikaans for foundation. So if you go there, .co.za, at the end you will find my contact number, my personal contact number, and you can help us with funds or just listen to what we are sharing. But we would love to get contact with the broader American society. And thank you so much for what you're doing for my country. I will start crying like Billy did. We are in desperate need of your prayers and your love and your guidance from your side. We really, really appreciate it.
So, Billy, where can people find more out about you? Which, by the way, for those watching, I'll put links in the description so you can find us more on social media and websites and all that when I get a chance to update the description.
Absolutely. So you can, of course, I'm head of a small organization of activists here in the United States called the Bearded Patriots. Which you can find more information about that, more information about me at thebeardedpatriots.com.
All right, awesome. And once again, I'll get that updated in the description. Might not be for a day or so, but I will get it done. On my end, please, people, this is my channel, my personal channel, The Issues from Left to Right. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'm not currently as active on this channel. You'll see episodes of a show called KC Reacts. It's now KC Reacts Live. My partner and I in the show, my co-host, we have moved to a new channel, which on YouTube is at KC Reacts Live. KC, my name being Kevin, his name being Chris. So once again, that's at KC Reacts Live on YouTube is where you can find that. And there we tend to deal, obviously, we're American focused, and we're focused a lot on the cultural issues such as children being transitioned, being sterilized, mutilated. We also focus on, DEI, children being exposed to drag, and also the invasion of female spaces by trans ideology. That tends to be what Chris and I focus on that channel. The link to that channel is also in the description of our prior shows. So on that note, thank you again for watching. And if you stuck in there for the full 3 hours and almost 20 minutes, God bless you and thank you so much. With that, God bless you all. Have a great evening. And I look forward to having these gentlemen on again in the future. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Have a good night, everyone.